you'll hear the term mood lighting. The reason you hear that is because mood is all about lighting and color. So if you use too many colors and you have lighting that's too harsh or has no impact as far as limiting color or tone or value, you'll have absolutely no mood. So a good way to make sure you have mood is to limit colors. So I don't know that I'll be using the Senneliers today. I will be using perhaps my other little tin here, and I think it all depends on how long I can stream and how long my battery lasts and everything. But I also have a little tin here with my cute little goat sheep guy on the front, and I took the peppermints out of here and I have put in my little Neocolor watercolor crayons, the Neocolor 2 watercolor crayons, and I also put in my Creacolor watercolor crayons, and so I have all of my colors in one little box. I see somebody in the comments, and hi, so good to see you here. And no, go ahead, you can go ahead and do whatever hashtags you can add, because I have no idea how this place works. So yeah, go ahead and go ahead and respond to that first real quick. Let's write, of course. Okay, so let me get back to my picture. And so here I am. And I guess I should probably tell people on Facebook. I really don't know if on YouTube, on my channel, if it's shown that I'm streaming here. I thought I'd put that on the settings a long time ago when I set this up, like a month and a half ago, but I'm not sure if it's still there. And I was sort of chickening out about starting today, so I decided I'd start instead of checking too many settings and such. So hopefully we can just get started. So let me move my computer a little bit further back, because the last thing I want is to drop watercolor stuff all over my computer. Not that wouldn't make a really fun Twitch video for everybody, but it wouldn't really be very good for the longevity of my channel here. So here I have a beautiful ink vase with flowers in it that I drew. I saw this at the DeYoung, I believe, which is a fine arts museum in San Francisco, and it was based on a mosaic painting there. In fact, I can show it. Let's see if I can get into my phone. So I have this photograph, and I got this at the, I took this at the DeYoung, and it's actually not a painting. It's, let's see if I can make it bigger. So you can see that it has little chunks of marble and stone and stuff. Maybe you can see that on the phone. You can always ask me to post a photo on here or email it to you if you want. But you can see there's lots of little colors in here, and they look very opaque because it's all little stone inlay, basically done in a mosaic style for this piece. And I was really captivated by it because, you know, I do a lot of detailed things, a lot of realistic looking things, and then every once in a while you, like all the other art movements, have so much to offer, and so this is a nice opaque, more simple, following into a Deco or Nouveau style. So I just thought I would try doing this. So I'll have this right here, and I'll be using it as a reference for how I'm painting my flowers. You can see I've gotten started a little bit. I started this on location, and I did do this in watercolor crayons, and you can see just how opaque all of that is. It's very opaque looking. You can use watercolor crayons in place of gouache, basically, is what I'm telling you, because gouache is opaque and watercolor crayons can also be used in an opaque way. So I'll go ahead and put my reference over onto this side, and I'll put my watercolor crayon bits over onto this side. And I don't think it's that important that you see all of the crayons and such. I think what's more important is that you see the painting, so I'll try to make sure I keep that in the camera. And again, let me move this over. And I might have a little bit of trouble, again, maneuvering stuff on my computer, but pretty sure once I get going on this a few times, this will become just like YouTube, and it'll be a lot easier. But this first time, you'll just have to be forgiving. So hopefully it'll work out. I've got only 2 brushes here, just so I can keep it simple. I've got a silver black velvet #2 and also a synthetic 1/4 inch angle brush. And the reason I'm using these is I typically use a nylon brush to blend out my edges so it doesn't hurt my sable or squirrel hair brushes, because blending and lifting is a little bit more aggressive. Then I have my silver black velvet, which is a mix of squirrel and synthetic hair, and it points really well, and I like using these because they last longer than sable, which I do have a lot of sable brushes, but I sort of get scared and don't really use them, whereas these brushes, because they point really well, they're easier to get out. So you can see just what a lovely point that comes to, and it typically stays this way, so it's for a longer time than sable brushes do. So let's get started on this little painting, because we can talk while I am painting. And I might at some point go and tell people on Facebook that I am on here. I've not been on Facebook for very long either, so it's not really going to increase a huge number of people showing up, but maybe like a few people will stop by, like, you know, the stalkers I appreciate, because, you know, if you're an artist, you always actually, you're like, please, people stalk me, so more people can show up and actually watch your stuff. So I'm going to start on this tulip here, and I think what I'm going to do is I also have always a separate little teeny thing like this. It's a little dappen dish with a little metal spoon in it to scoop water, clean water, into my paints. And I typically do this because I don't want to get all of my dirty water into my paint, so I have usually a clean water dish just like that with a little spoon in it or a little dropper. So that'll sit there. Now again, this might all end horribly with me dropping all this water onto my computer, because as you can see, my computer really is just right there. But I'm not willing to move my computer out of the way, because right now I can see my screen and everything on it. So right now it's just gonna have to stay right there. And I guess this is not just a watercolor video then, it's also it's a thrill ride, because at any point in this, during this video, this water can spill over onto the computer and I'll have to get a new computer. I guess I won't be able to tell the Apple people that it just broke, because this will all be recorded and everybody will know that I screwed it up all on my own. But so here's I'm moving these paints over just a bit. I feel like I've gotten really slow in painting here because haven't stopped setting up yet. But so here we go. Those comments are funny. You know, let me see. I have to see what she's saying. Oh, great, awesome. Yes, I should go on to Facebook at some point. In fact, maybe I'll do that now. Say, get over here, guys. I am streaming on Twitch for the first time. So, just gonna say that real quick. So, streaming live on Twitch with watercolor, painting, and art chat. And I guess I'll give the link. So let me do that real quick. Continue to do this. And I'm down to 75% my battery, so at some point I might have to move my desk closer to my computer plug-in area to get it replugged in, but let me just leave this link here on streaming live on Twitch. I'll also write for first time so that people know that to be excited. Okay, posted. Hopefully people will show up. Okay, so let me go back to my happy little Twitch page. This is a lot of fun. This reminds me of when I used to teach at university. I taught university for 4 years. I taught international history, and I also taught calculus, because I studied physics and then international history for my bachelor's and my master's. And it was a lot of fun teaching because, well, I'm kind of an introvert because I'm an artist, but I talk a lot. So it's good to have a captive audience to talk to if you are teaching, you can totally do that, you know, but it also allows you to be private if you're an artist, because you don't have to be social all the time, because I am the kind of person that's not social all the time. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm taking this tulip that was, I don't think it's really that important that you see it all the time. I'll explain the colors because the colors are pretty much primary. I'll try to keep an image or send an image on the screen if it turns out that I'm ever working with an image where I'm manipulating the color scheme and making it so it's not just the local color. So what I mean by that is that this is a local color of red, orange, right? So I'm also having red, orange right here, following right onto the paper, red, orange right here. I'm not really saying, can I change this color to a different color scheme? I'm really following for this first stream a very sort of corresponding color scheme. What I see here is what I'll put here. Okay, so in the future, if we become more creative with color schemes and shadows and complements and all sorts of other things like reflected light, which this isn't doing, this is just a little mosaic. So he's very humble in how he's doing his color scheme, so we don't have to do that. Now there is some mixing going on here, because I'm not coloring it just one color. I'm saying, okay, I can see a little bit of red and orange in the mosaic here, so I'm putting on some red and orange over here at the same time. So basically what ends up happening is that you have this mixing that happens on the paper, which is a lot more interesting than if I just mixed a red orange and applied it right there, and I'm sure a lot of you artists know that. And it's a very interesting tip because, you know, the way we're raised is that you don't, when you work with crayons or color pencils or markers when you're a kid, not as an adult, because all adult artists do a lot of mixing and blending with colors, but it's not single colors that usually show up. So it's even a green that you see is a mix of more blue greens and yellow greens and all sorts of colors, and maybe even a little bit red for the complement, or some other color like blue for a reflected light. So all that stuff shows up. So even when you don't see it, you can exaggerate it, you can throw it in, and it makes it exciting, you know. So but it is nice to be here. I have to confess that my hands are shaking because I have not done this before, and when I film videos I feel very much in control for YouTube videos, because I sort of film them and then I show up afterward and it's all done and everything. So I haven't done a live streaming video ever in my entire life, so this is the first time I'm doing a live stream. So I'm nervous. So you'll have to forgive me if my hands shake a bit or my voice shakes a bit. So let's see. I am also going to see maybe if I want to, if anybody has any problems with how small these stems and flowers are, just tell me to zoom in and I will absolutely zoom in, so I can do that. I downloaded that app for the camera, for the Logitech camera, that allows you to zoom in more. So if you want to see this stuff closer up. Now, if you are okay and you want to see the paint at the same time, along with the phone at the same time, and you know where I'm dabbing and doing all this stuff, then I won't zoom in. But the zoom in is going to be if you want to see details. And I typically like to do that for YouTube videos, is that I do a lot of zooms because I sort of prefer people not seeing the paint all the time or the reference all the time, and I think that they might want to see what I'm doing on the paper. So it really has to do with what you guys end up telling me eventually for references. Now, again, I can just, even if nobody shows up, I can totally be like a one-man circus or a one-woman circus, because the thing about me is I like to teach and I like to talk, so there will be a lot of information that goes out into the voids of the internet through me talking here, and hopefully people will be here to hear it. If not, then I'm having a good time, right? And that's what it's about, because art is also very enjoyable if you do it by yourself and nobody sees it, because it's meditative. Of course, there is some stress when you do the planning for the drawing and the sketching, but I've always found that if you plan well, then you can really relax and do a good painting. Some people do like to be more spontaneous, and I've done that sometimes too, but I feel like even with my spontaneous work, there is some subconscious planning that goes on that really assists in me being able to be spontaneous and relaxed, if that makes any sense. So I'm continuing to put down a little bit of blue and a little bit of green and letting the watercolor crayon mix on the paper. Now this is being applied wet on dry, which means I did not wet the paper first, because if I did, this paint would bleed everywhere, because there's very little spaces here that I'm applying this paint to. So if I wanted to color in, like, say, the entire background, maybe what I would do is put in water first and then add the colors, so that the colors would have time to move and didn't just sink right in. But because I'm doing small spaces, what I want to do is make sure that I have this available, control available for myself, because you lose a lot of control the more water you have, and the less water you have, the more control you gain. So if you want more control, then have less water, and if you want less control, you want free flowing, abstract shapes and edges that show up, then of course put as much water down as you can. And I think that's part of the fun of using any kind of water media, is that you can get both. Okay, so you can do some amazing effects and all sorts of stuff like that, and make it as loose and abstract and random as possible, and really let it inspire you. And then after that, you can sit down and do some detailed parts that end up being very specific to a shape, and completely are you're in control there. And so they work very well, you know, both ways. So still working on this little stem area, and I think maybe I should go over to a more exciting flower first, so you can see I'm going to explain the wet and dry application once, because what I'd like to do, let's see, comments, we've got comments. Oh, thanks, I'm so glad you liked the stream. My watercolor canvas here, this is a watercolor journal, in fact, and so the size of it is only, I think it's 5 by 8 is the bigger ones, and I think this one's only a 3.5 by 5 or 6. And because I'm doing the spread the whole way across, I get the whole long canvas, right? So I've doubled it. So I think this is going to be more like 3.5 by 12, you know, area that I'm painting on. And that's really, to me, something really cool about working in a watercolor journal or a watercolor book, is that you end up having you can use one side, you can use both sides, and it becomes shorter and longer. This is not Arch's watercolor paper. This is, I think this is a Moleskine journal. So it's a Moleskine watercolor journal, not just a sketching journal, because if you don't have a watercolor paper, it doesn't have any gelatin in it. So the sizing or gelatin in watercolor paper is what allows you to blend colors, move them around, lift them. So you want to make sure you buy something that has watercolor paper written on it, because you can put watercolor down onto other paper, but it will buckle. Also, you won't be able to lift and blend colors. So if you want to lift and blend colors and do all that stuff, then you want to make sure you work on watercolor paper. And this is a travel journal. So Arches, which is the best kind of watercolor paper, and it comes in really smooth paper called hot press, and it comes in textured paper called cold press, and then really textured paper called rough. And it's all good depending on, you know, if you want to work with more realism, you want to usually get the smoother paper. If you want to do landscapes and such, you can get the textured paper. And cold press is really for people who are in the middle and want a little bit of both. So, you know, this is cold press paper. It has a little bit of texture, but not too much. And again, it's not Arches, it's Moleskine, but it's good for watercolor crayons, which are more forgiving. If you work with, if I wanted to do a super like 80 layer painting here, then with watercolor or something, like if I want to put like 10, 20 washes, this is not going to be the best paper for it. You'd want to get something like Arches watercolor paper or Fabriano Artistico watercolor paper. But this is pretty decent for using, making little journal entries that don't have too many layers and too much lifting or too much realism. You will find that it will be frustrating if you want to lift too many times, but it does lift a good handful of times. I'd say about 3 or 4 times before it finally decides to conk out on you. So, but I have journals in different sizes, and I have the 5 by 8, and I think this is the 4 by 6 or some such size. I'll look up the exact size and put it down as a comment in a little bit, but I feel like I need to make sure I get a little bit more painting done before I can stop. And let's see, over here I did say before I got distracted that I was going to go into a flower, and then I didn't do a flower. So let's go to, hi, I see more people on here. I'm going to say hi back, and that way they know that I love them for being here. Thank you for coming. Let's see, I'll write Moleskine water color journal around 4 Yeah, what I've got to do is I got to make sure that I don't cover up my comment section, because my comment section gets covered up, and then I don't get to see what nice happy people are dropping by or saying. But be assured that I will answer all of your questions if you have any questions, and if you have any questions and I don't type the answer, I can definitely give you a much more detailed answer while I'm speaking. So let's look to see at this tulip over here. Now I did this with a permanent marker that doesn't run. So I did this with if I did this with a water soluble marker, what would end up happening is as soon as I touched it with more water, the lines would run. And that's a really nice effect for certain paintings. I can show you one where I did do that. But if you want your lines to stay put, you want to use a permanent non-water soluble marker. And also depending on how long you want your stuff to last, you can also make it archival marker. So here's a painting that I did on site at some point. This is like a sculpture of stone. It was in Filoli, which is a historical gardens area here in the Bay Area in California. And I went there, and I don't know if it's pronounced Filoli or Filoli, but both of them sound weird to me, so I won't be able to tell you which one's the correct one. But I did this with a marker that runs, and what that means is that you can draw your drawing, and then as soon as you add a little bit of water just on the brush, no paint, your ink will start to run. And I'll do that in another demo at some point. But it gives these great shadow effects where you get a value painting. And then after that, you can come back in with some color and add that. But so it gives this great effect where you can make your ink painting also into a sort of watercolor runny type painting. So, but in this case, I used I think it was a Zig permanent pigment-based archival marker, and what it does is that it's permanent, doesn't run, so you can go ahead and paint to your heart's content over something, and the lines will stay exactly where they are, and that's good more for like, comic book style drawing and this kind of deco or nouveau style drawing where you don't want the lines to run at all. That would be a bad thing because you want it to stay very neat looking. So, but there's so many different looks and there's so many different effects that you can get, and that's really the beauty of art, is that you can end up getting all these different looks from different periods and study everybody from the Impressionist, Neo-Impressionist, Realism, Romanticist, everything, and you get something great out of it. I think one of the reasons I'm really drawn to the Art Nouveau period of the 1920s to 30s era is because it's a very global inspired art form. So what you end up having is you have art that is inspired by Western art, but also Japanese art and Persian art and Mughal art. And I'm American. I've been here my whole life, but my family is Pakistani Persian. So the exciting thing that I found from all of the Art Nouveau art is it's actually Western art with a very Eastern flair, and that's where comic books and like Muka and all these other amazing, sort of graphic style poster art came from. It's the mix of Eastern and Western art, and so you end up having an exciting thing that for me, because I'm a hybrid culturally, you see art as a cultural hybrid, and what's more exciting than that, than seeing art that is echoes how you live your life, which is we eat a diverse diet usually in the United States now, where you eat food from different parts of the world. You can go out and have that. Why not do that with your art too, right? Where you have some amazing stuff from different parts of the world and you bring it into your art style and painting. And you see that, of course, probably most popularly in anime, where it's become famous in the West, but it originated in the East in Japan. But there's plenty of other art forms that have borrowed from Eastern aesthetics, and so there's a lot of exciting things that you can do with your own art by doing that. There's great artists in Northern Europe too that did some great contributions to sort of storybook turn of the century style illustrations. People like Edmond Dulac, who was French, but he was an Anglophile, and he moved to England and did amazing watercolor paintings there for a lot of storybooks, everything from the Arabian Nights to Grimm's, and people like John Bauer, who died very young, but did an amazing job. I think he was, I'm trying to remember if he was a Nordic or a Dutch painter. I can't remember. He wasn't Dutch. John Bauer, Swedish. He was a Swedish painter, yeah. So he died very young, but he did some amazing stuff that eventually inspired Brian Froud and all these other painters that were working in a storybook style with that sort of great wild woods, trolls and fairies type look. That's all from John Bauer, even though you've probably not heard of him. So that's my flower, and you can see that I've done a few different colors there, all wet on dry, very much in control. And typically I put down one color and I don't waste the paint. I come back and do the blending out edge with my other brush. But because this is such a little painting, I'm not really wasting that much paint. And you can also see that I can come back and I can lift. Now I don't want to again do this with my nicer brush, so maybe I'll put that down, and you can see that I can get my angled brush right in here and say I wanted to lift a highlight here. This watercolor crayon will lift right off this paper. You can see that there's a little clear channel almost back to the white right there. And you can do the same thing with this red area, which I think went a little bit too red as I was talking about John Bauer and Edmund Duloc and everybody. The other amazing thing about Golden Age illustrators like John Bauer, Edmund Duloc, or Aubrey Beardsley, who was an amazing ink artist who did a lot of scary ink illustrations, like for Poe stories, and also he was very inspired by Japanese art. Duloc is very inspired by Mughal and Persian art, and they were, both Western painters, illustrators, I should say, because they were not in the field of fine art, but they were in the field of doing illustrations for commission for these wonderful storybooks at the turn of the century. But their paint and their work was really small. You'd expect people work really large nowadays. And if you find some original pieces by Duloc or Aubrey Beardsley or Kai Nielsen, who was another amazing Art Nouveau era inspired painter, and they did their pieces very small, and there was a huge amount of detail there. So I think it's also funny to find them. They're in a museum someplace, because I feel like I found somebody who's a kindred spirit who speaks to me, because I like doing stuff in a lot of detail, but I like doing stuff pretty small, So it's interesting. Let me say hi to another one of my cool watercolor buddies. So happy to see you guys here. I think this is, I'm assuming that's Sufyan, so if it's Sufyan, hi Sufyan. If it's not Sufyan, then hi to whoever else has the same sort of initials in your name. But it's really good to see you here. And I'm going to be doing a watercolor Twitch art channel. We'll be doing watercolor and gouache and ink and doing all sorts of really excited things here, because I really enjoy doing my YouTube channel, but I feel like I don't get a chance to post as much on it because it's a lot more work to edit the videos, and then to voice over and do all this stuff. So I really don't want to always post on YouTube, and I think Twitch is an amazing new opportunity for me, because like I said, I have not live streamed. I know live streaming's been around for a while, but I haven't live streamed, so this to me is an exciting new thing to do, and it's very reminiscent of how I used to teach. I did end up teaching, numerous subjects, and this is very much like when I taught art classes, where you can paint and do it at the same time. The difference is that I don't see your pieces, but feel free to post images of a piece if you're working on something. It doesn't have to be the same thing if it's something different, and I can always give you comments on it while I'm sitting here, or you can email it to me and tell me to check my email, and I can look it up and talk to you about it. So I think that you can do as much as we want to do, as little or as much as we want to do here, because if it's just you guys watching me and asking me questions and learning from me, then that's amazing. But if you guys want me to also comment on your stuff, then I'd be happy to do that, especially as I'm here doing this and available. So I'm going to work on this tulip up here now, on this part of the mosaic, and you can see that it's a lot lighter. I don't know if you can really see it on the phone, because I can see on the screen that it's all glared up, but let's see. I can bring it over here. It's a very light sort of pink color. So what I'm going to do here is, there's two ways to do this. I can just come in with a pink and make it very light, and I'm using a little bit of a sort of a fuchsia, so it's not quite a red pink, it's more of a purple pink, and that's because I've gotten tired of all of the very, very orange and warm colors. I actually tend towards cooler colors, and so it's kind of surprising. I think this painting got away from me with a lot of the warmer colors. I tend to make stuff cooler even when it's warmer. I think I find it relaxing. It's because I talk so fast and I'm so high strung that when you have warm colors and they're like angry, passionate type mood colors. I think the cooler colors are great to calm me down and make me feel like, remind me of water and sky and such. And so what I've done is I'm actually not saving much of the white here, because I can see that when I blend this away and save the white of the paper, this looks very light in comparison to any of these, which I did more opaquely. So I think I'll use this not as the watercolor crayons. You can use them like watercolor, or you can use them like gouache. So I'm just going to use them like gouache. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, oh no, I'm not using paint tubes. Sophia, these are not paint tubes. These are crayons cut into bits. Don't say paint tubes around me. I'm scared of paint tubes. I can't squeeze out paint tubes. They hurt my hands, and I forever think that they're just drying out in the tube, and I worry about how fast to use them. So I get pans because I'm like obsessed with not wasting stuff, and then obsessed with not having a budget on how fast I have to use it, which is what I feel like happens when you have tubes. Is you have like a year to use them, and then there's like a constant crunch. It's like, well, if I wanted to be stressed out, I'd go back to school or something, right? I don't want to be that stressed out. So I tend not to. So these are the watercolor crayons cut into little teeny pieces, and I've cut them and put them in this pan here. And they're all in order, from rainbow order, so that way, or spectral order, I should say. The correct way to say it is they're in spectral order, so that way they're not getting all mixed up into each other in a muddy way. So these will run into each other, but since they're like color wheel siblings, they're not going to turn into mud. If I put the red next to the greens, on the other hand, it would be mayhem, right? It would be like Sin City in there. So what I'm doing now is I've added white to make this more opaque, and I'm going to continue to add more white, and that will make this flower, even when it's light and cooler, not look like so pale on the paper in comparison to the other flowers. It'll get more body. One of the reasons we call gouache body color, it's the other word for it, is because it's an opaque medium. So it is like watercolor, but it's opaque, and it adds body, like literally body, weight to something. So I have these paints, and I do have, it's funny, I've gotten these and I've sort of fallen in love with them because you can use them like watercolor or like gouache, but I will warn you that because they have a wax in them, they do lift more than watercolor. And even when you use them as gouache, I actually think they're just fine because gouache lifts more than watercolor anyway, but they do have a sort of shiny waxiness to them that may not be suited to everything. It's very subtle. It's very subtle. It's not like you're putting down shellac on the paper or anything like that, but it's a subtle sort of shininess that you might get, like, kind of when you do a lot of layered color pencils and it starts to sort of burnish into the paper. So you get this effect almost immediately. So you can like trick somebody into thinking that you spent a bazillion years burnishing color pencils into the paper when you actually didn't. You just used watercolor crayons, and they have that wax in them. But I've also found, and I said this in my YouTube video from I think around Christmas time, I forget which, oh yeah, it was like the different ways to use color and different ways to use adult coloring books, right? So I had 12 different ways in there, and I suggested watercolor crayons because the adult coloring book page paper has absolutely no sizing on it. It's not watercolor paper. It's made for like markers and crayons and such. So if you want to get something that moves around on there, these watercolor crayons are perfect because they have this wax in them, so they move around much better even on paper with no sizing. So they re-wet just fine. They re-wet in here over and over again, and on the paper you can lift them. They are easy to lift, but if you use like a soft hair brush and you don't over scratch into an area, they won't lift out too much. They won't lift out like a huge amount. But like I was showing earlier, and I'll show it again at some point, is I can come into a petal and completely lift a color out, more or less. But it's not like when I go over with a new color that it immediately lifts up. I did notice when I was doing these pairs, I'll go back to another page in this journal. That's what's great about having a watercolor journal, is I can show you other examples instead of running to my cabinet room. But I was working on these pairs, and I barely got started. As you can see, this needs to be fixed. The rounded edge on here, I need to add cast shadows, I need to completely darken up all the rest of those. But I was working on this with watercolor crayons, these same guys right here, and what I noticed was that when I was putting in these little dots, they kept lifting up because there was enough waxy layers of this on here that, unlike watercolor, I couldn't just do this in a harmoniously easy way, right? It was like it layered for a while and then it started lifting up. So it is something that you have to be careful about, you know, if you're using, if you're doing realism. So, I mean, that was obviously meant to be a botanical painting. This is not. This is more of a stylized floral painting. You know, it does have flora in it, but it's not botanical in nature, which means it's not realistic, you know, vegetal painting. So if you're going to do something realistic, maybe watercolor crayons are not the best idea because they do sort of not like to layer a huge amount. But they do lift well, and they do layer pretty easily, but not many realistic layers is what I would say, right? So you don't want to go to watercolor ink, gouache, or something else. So let's see, I want to see what's more interesting apart from the stems that I could do here. I think I do find the stems interesting. So what I'm going to show here is more wet on dry. Again, there's no reason to really wet this paper because I'm doing these tiny little sections. And I'm going to end up doing, I'm going to start with blue because you see how this is a blue, yellow with a little bit of red and everything thrown in. So I'm going to start the stem out with blue on one side. And it's just a plain old blue, no green in it. And it's a warm, it's a yellowy blue, so in that sense it's not like a very, very red blue. So it wants to be green is what I mean. And then I'm going to add green down the other side, and it'll blend it and give it a nice dual color tone there. And again, if it's driving anybody crazy to see these stems from far away, then tell me and I will zoom in. I don't know how much more I can zoom in, but I know I can zoom in some. So, but if everybody wants to see all the paint and everything that I'm getting all at the same time, then I will leave it at this level. But now I'm going to get a very yellow green and pop it in on this side of the leaf and over here, so I can get that started. And it's not the only color I want to put there. I also want to put in a bluer color, so I'm going to go into one of my bluer colors right here. And I think I'm going to move my little dampened dish. So this is my little clean water. Again, I can like scoop little clean water into my thing, but I'm going to move it off of my keyboard because that seems like a little bit too high risk. Like I said, it's going to become like a very scary video at some point if I go and dump all that water onto my computer keyboard. But so I'm going to add in, and it looks like that green has a little bit too much water in it, so I'm going to take my brush and make it a thirsty brush, dab off all the water off of it, and then use it to lift off the extra water, and it comes right off. Usually with watercolor, the major problem people have is too much water or too little water. So if something is not working the way you want it to, just go in the opposite direction of whatever water is there. So if you're trying to do something but it's not working and there's a lot of water on the page, mop the water up. If you're trying to do something and it's not working and you have no water on the page, then add water, because it's usually the opposite if you're trying to get an effect, because otherwise you'd already be getting it, right? So if you had the right amount of water on the page, you'd already be getting that effect, and if you're not getting it, it means that you need to go in the different direction for water. And a lot of people are really scared of blooms and such too, but keep in mind that blooms make some beautiful effects. So depending on where they are, you can totally leave them there or even make them happen. So it's the kind of thing where part of it is accepting that it's going to be a little bit out of your control, just like your life. You can't really control everything in your life. So it's the same thing with the watercolor. It's a philosophy of what you can do, right? Now that sounds a little bit too preachy. I don't know. Just do what you want to do. But if you are a total control freak, I would probably say that watercolor is going to be a little bit scary for you, probably, because you can't control everything. So you have to let some of it go. You're going to have to train yourself to let some of it go. And then for the rest of it, you're going to basically say, okay, I can control this. And I found, I mean, I'm kind of a control freak, so I speak from experience, is that I found that you can actually do both. You can actually control it where you need to and let it go in other places when you feel like you need some spontaneous inspiration. So, I mean, it really works very well. Now, they work as these watercolor crayons, you can use them for finished pieces. I've used them for finished pieces before. Just depends on the realism of the piece. So if you're doing a piece that requires many layers to get realism versus something that you're doing more a la prima and you'd sort of get there immediately, then you're probably not going to want to use these watercolor crayons because they do because of their waxy nature, they do lift a little bit. But if it's something where you can achieve the realism quickly and you don't need to go through glazes, basically, many glazes, because these will glaze, these will lift, but they just won't glaze and stay down as much as traditional watercolors. If you want something that is okay with lifting, that's great, because for a paper without sizing, like that coloring book page paper, this works great. Or if you're doing something where you can do a thick layer and not mind leaving it there, then that's fine too. But if you're doing a thick layer and want to layer over it, that's not going to work so well with these, because they'll sort of lift back up because they're crayons. So, I mean, but you can see from this painting, you know, Sufyan, you can see that this painting is very not realistic in comparison. It's a very stylized vegetal, you know, it's a very sort of decorative way of doing a flower. But okay, I'm gonna decline this call. That's in the middle of my Instagram. Sorry about that. I believe that was my cousin who was calling me. And I think she doesn't even know how to go on Twitch. She's one of my older cousins. Like, she's a lot, she's a lot older. She's from an older generation of kids, because my mom has 6 brothers, and she's the oldest brother's daughter. So she has, like, grown kids of her own and everything. But, my mother is like only second from the youngest, so she had, you know, obviously her kids much later, so some of my cousins are like super old. Well, everybody gets old, so I don't mean it that way, I mean older than me. But a lot of them had their kids already, so sometimes I was like an aunt to some of my cousins' kids, or like an aunt once removed, or second cousin, however you say that. In Pakistan they say that it's a aunt even though it's your cousin's kid. But they were a lot younger than me. The kids were really young. I was close to their age, and the cousins were like almost my parents' age, basically, because my parents were younger. But that's neither here nor there. It's very complicated. Kind of like the stems here. There's some stems that started way earlier, and so the other thing I did on this, I guess I should point it out, is that there's on this side here, I finished the vine and stuff coming down, and in the actual reference, this is coming down on, hold on, let me see if I can get this to come back to the right. Rotate. Okay, it's not rotating, but you can see the vines come down on both sides, and for me, I only did the vine on one side. I didn't do it on the other side. I wanted to just leave it asymmetrical because I didn't really see the appeal as a study to finish it all the way. I thought it was fine if I left it unfinished. Now, if you wanted to do this completely exactly like what you are seeing in the mosaic here, then of course finish it. Or do a background if you want, make it abstract, color it in with nothing but blooms, add salt effects, so you can do all sorts of stuff. And we can do those kinds of things on other days where, you know, I think we should try to do as many different watercolor effects as possible, honestly. Yeah, I am. I'm one of the younger people in my family, but like I've got a voicemail and it's blocking my reference. How do we get this off this? Okay, hold on. So notice my phone is it's the rose gold, because I'm really girly like that. I guess. And that might be insulting to somebody, because maybe somebody thought it was super masculine and they got it for themselves as a super masculine color, but I guess you could go both ways with rose gold. But this is a really nice, relaxing painting to do. I mean, this is one of the reasons I can talk about all sorts of random things, like the color of my phone and like my cousins and such, is because this painting's not very hard. So some days you don't want to do really complicated paintings all the time. It does become stressful. I'm not going to lie that complicated paintings and more realistic paintings, they will need more stress and attention than less realistic paintings. And sometimes you just want to practice your coordination and play around with the color schemes. And so, you know, you're still learning something. You're still learning about the colors, and you're still learning about your eye-hand coordination and keeping that in check. And then you just can have a more meditative time, though. You can see I keep throwing in a little bit of blue while this green thread is still wet for it to blend in. And it's because I don't want to make it so that the color is always just the same. And I think I might even start throwing in a little bit more yellow in here, because I do see that in the reference there is, and the reference of course is not a painting for people who got here later. The reference is a mosaic, and so it's interesting because when you have a mosaic and it's already flat, you can choose to make it more or less flat, right? So you can choose to make it, if I wanted to, I could have made these more 3D and tried to make it look more like stone poking up out of there, but I think I really wanted to play with that. I think I'm going to take just a teeny break from this painting, and what I'm going to do while I'm still here, because I don't know how long I'm going to stream today. I would like to stream ideally until I finished one of these paintings and give that much time, but I'm not 100% sure if people will want to see just that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a different painting that I was working on. It's a lighthouse, and let's get this over here. This postcard. So got this lighthouse that I was working on. It's actually based off of a piece of glass, not a painting. I bought this piece of glass that had a lighthouse done in it, kind of like a little piece of stained glass that I gave to my dad because my dad really likes lighthouses. And I did these with the Senneliers. And you can see that it's transparently worked in some areas, and actually it's all transparent. I don't see any opaque. You can also see that I warped the paper a bit. Now, people have asked me this before, like, what do you do with this? Well, you can wet it on the back and then iron it flat. Dry iron, no steam. People say you can use steam too. I don't know if I want the steam going in through the back and steaming the color particle pigments, I don't know, in the opposite direction of what I put them down in. So I typically don't iron with steam if I flatten something. You can also put it into a flat folder even without wetting it if that really freaks you out, and it'll just flatten out over time. But ironing really is harmless. It's depending on how, one of these days I will show you how to iron a painting flat too. So I've got my little Sennelier box, and these colors actually will also come in a big tin box. I think the tin box that you have, Sufyan, with the colors in it, I think it's the same colors except for it came in a much nicer box. But these colors are also available like this in this much smaller box, and it's more compact for traveling. It's a travel kit. And again, these are mixed with honey, not just gum arabic. So they're very creamy, they're very soft. It can be a little bit sticky if you're living in a very humid climate. And I'm almost done with this White House and this lighthouse, and what I'm doing is called it the White House. Well, I guess it's because we just got a new president that people don't all agree on. So I've got most of this done, and you can see I've been adding in these water droplets, and these were in the glass. These were bubbles in the glass, and I thought maybe I'd do a water droplet while I was here so that you can see how I did them. Now, I can't remember if I did those with a razor blade or not, but I'll show you one with a razor blade just so you can see how it works. So first of all, let me go and try to find my little lighthouse reference, and don't worry, I will switch back to the flower painting at some point. I know that leaving stuff out in the middle without completing it can be a little bit stressful, so for some people want to see something finished all the way through. So don't worry, I will go back to that. I just wanted to show you as a break how to do a watercolor droplet in glass, because this is basically, again, if you can try to imagine, this is a piece of stained glass that I gave to my dad, and it had a lighthouse in it, and the person who'd made the glass had blown bubbles into it, so you can see all of these cool water droplets. And I wanted to incorporate that into the watercolor painting, so I tried to draw in circles and really light pencil, and then I came back and I tried to make them more 3D looking than the rest of the lighthouse, which was much more sort of a ink drawing type style. And it kind of reminds me of Song of the Sea. I don't know if anybody has seen that movie. And it's a cartoon movie, but it reminds me of Song of the Sea. So, and no, these aren't these are the same colors as come in the tin box, that the bigger tin box, like the one that you have, Sufyan. I believe they're the same colors. I'm not 100% sure, but I think the Sennelier colors are more or less the same as the ones that came in that box. So, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a drop here. So let's do this big one because it's a nice big one, and I might botch it because I haven't done this. Actually, I haven't worked on this actual painting in I think many months, because I was distracted and doing lots of other things with my mom because she was sick. and on chemo, so I didn't get a chance to come back and work on this painting. It's one of these paintings that I started but didn't finish. So I'm just going to get a little bit of this cinerous blue. This is the color here. It's cinerous blue. It looks a little bit kind of like a creamier cobalt. It doesn't granulate, but a little bit darker than cobalt. But again, it has an opaque tendency to it. It's not super transparent, and it's because these particular colors, not all the colors that Finalizing makes, but the particular colors that come in this box have a tendency to be more opaque. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to go ahead and start out this droplet, and I can see up there that I want to have, and this is going down pretty opaque, so I might want to thin it out. But I'm going to make half of this nice and flat like that, but I don't want a hard edge, so I'm going to come back with some water and blend out my edge here. And I just think that I'm a little bit of a attention span. I move very fast in my head sometimes, and I have attention span issues. So I just thought if we took a break from the other painting and did this water droplet, that I could show you guys how to do a realistic looking water droplet, and then it would be interesting too. You might hear sirens in the back. I think there's a police car going by. I really hope everybody's okay. Oh, there's a fire truck. I hope everything's alright. Saw this terrible accident going over Pacheco Pass over the weekend. It was a giant truck on fire, and there was a medevac helicopter, orange helicopter flying around over the top, and the truck was on fire, like super on fire, like it was a truck out of a movie. I've never seen a car crash have a giant fire, a giant orange red fire that you could see from all the way down the hill, and huge billowing smoke. But I hope to God that person was okay. It seemed like whatever it was a terrible accident. It's because it was raining, and somebody must have crashed their truck really hard on the hill. But what I've done is painted this again wet on dry. I do a lot of wet on dry, and then I make it blend out the side edges. That's the one that gives you the most control. So you may not see me do the wet into wet very often unless I'm doing a bigger shape, or unless I'm doing a background, because all of this is wet into wet. But since this is already done for this and you didn't get to see it, but next time hopefully you'll get to see it. And let me just make sure real quick that I don't have any comments. Yeah, there's lots of ways that are good to flatten it down. So if you can read in the comment section, you can see that Sophiane is giving another way of how to flatten something down. But what I'm going to do now is, it's mostly dry, but I'm going to come back in with a darker color. So I think that this blue, the cinerous blue, I do not believe it goes as dark as the other blue. So I have two options here. I can, I am going to go back in with another layer of cinerous blue, and then after that I'm going to come in and try to go in with this ultramarine, color, and see if I can make it darker. So the more contrast you give something, the more value contrast you give something, the more likely you are to give it a 3D look. So that's the important thing when it comes to making something look 3D, is have you really exploited your values? Have you stretched your values? So this is just a teeny humble little water drop. He doesn't need that kind of help because he's just a teeny little drop. But if you are doing something like an eye, or if you're doing something that's very realistic in shadows, then you want to make sure that your values are stretched. If you only have a mid-tone range of values, or a low-level range of values, like from 0 to 5 or from 4 to 7 or whatever it is, but omitting the hard values at the very end, the 7 to 10, then you're probably not going to get a 3D look. It's not impossible, but it's hard. I'm going to add a little bit of blue into this now, the darker blue, the ultramarine blue. And so what I'm going to do now is just teeniest bit of ultramarine blue. And it's funny, one of the things I can't stop thinking about is that when I paint for my YouTube videos, like, I paint a lot faster because I don't talk, and then I do the talking later. So now my painting is like super slow, slower than I've ever painted before, because I'm talking and painting at the same time. But as long as you guys don't mind, and I'm sure I'll eventually get to the point where I can speed up my painting a bit and still be doing the talking, because eventually you adapt, you get used to things. So what I'm going to do now is continue to, you can see that droplet is already really coming along, and I don't want to lose all of the lighter areas, so I'm going to stop with the blue anywhere else except for just these edges where I'm really trying to heighten it. So, and I think what would be nice is if I added another area of even darker blue. Just make it darker, push it. Watercolor always dries lighter. So until you get to your very end, what I used to really be frustrated about when I first started watercolor is that I'd really like the look of something that I did, and then it would dry lighter, and I didn't want to paint over it. I would be like, I really like the edges here. I really like the effects here. How can I possibly now go over this with more color? I'll make it darker, but I'll lose the effect. And you really just have to tell yourself, don't get married to any of the effects beginning in the beginning, okay? Or even in the middle. Because if you want to make it darker, you are going to lose whatever that is. So if it's like some amazing edge that's feathered out and made it like the prettiest droplet that you've ever seen in your life, and it looks like magic and it's out of some kind of old Disney movie, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to keep it if you want to make it darker. So you just have to accept that you'll lose it when you make it darker. So, and that's something that is hard to do. I am not saying it's easy, because I used to be all totally like that. I used to be like, I just can't. It's so pretty. And then eventually I had to tell myself, no, you have to. You absolutely have to. Otherwise, you will have a less realistic painting. And that's okay too, actually, because in the cases where you want to leave it less realistic, but you like the effect, then just leave it less realistic, then it's totally okay. But if you are interested in making it more realistic, then you are going to end up losing some of those edges. So what I'm going to do now is, I don't know if you can tell, but the glass had these bubble warps in it where the little bubble came out of the glass, but also had a puckered edge around it. So in some areas, you also have like this space of white around it. And I'm going to have to sort of delicately punch it in first, and then I'm going to come back, because I do like this white cloud in the back here, and I don't want to eat at all of it. But I do want to imply that this shadow glass is coming out. I don't have the real piece of glass, I'll just show it to you. It's at my parents' house, and they don't live in Northern California like I do. They live in Southern California. So what I'm going to do is blend out the edge here. So again, you always want a balance of hard and soft edges, but if something is melting away, more likely than not, it's going to need a soft edge. And because this is watercolor and not oil, you will have to always work for your soft edges. Your hard edges are going to be automatic. You won't have to work for those, but you will always have to work for your soft edges. You can't get both. In oil, you always get your soft edges. You don't have to work for those, but you have to work for your hard edges. So it's one or the other, depending on what medium you're using. Now, a lot of people will say that's why watercolor is harder, because soft edges are so hard to get, and they make a big difference when it comes to realism. Like, they make things look a lot more real. So that's one of the reasons why people say watercolor is harder to work with, is because oil gives you naturally soft edges everywhere, and it will make your work look more realistic in an easier way, whereas watercolor is going to look harder and scratchy, and you have to work at those soft edges. But if you ever have too many hard edges, one of the things you have to tell yourself is, did I start this painting with wet into wet? Did I make everything really wet and blend everything in the background first? Because if you didn't do that, unless you're doing a botanical white on white painting, you probably need to just throw in more water near to the beginning, middle stages of your painting, and then work on that way everything blends and becomes bleedy at the beginning, and you end up with a lot of soft edges in the background. So you don't want to lose the opportunity to have soft edges when you can get them near the beginning. Because if I wanted to go and do the background now, I would lose these drops a little bit. They would blur a little bit. So that's why you usually work from back to front, right? So all of my stuff is typically back to front, unless I don't have a background. Then I just go straight to the foreground. I'm going to check to see if I have any new comments that I need to respond to. Yes, all of this stuff is agreed. I think it's very sweet that you guys are here. There's 9 people, and so I'm doing that still, and I'm not going to, I'm going to try not to bore you guys, so make sure you tell me if you want me to address a particular thing, or if you find the information not relevant to what you feel like you wanted to see, then just let me know. I've done watercolor painting, and I've done you know, art history, teaching and all this stuff. So I know a lot about different fields of art and also historical arts, historical art periods and various different artists. And so, and it's funny how much that can actually help your painting, because, you know, maybe an artist that you like inspires you to think about something in a particular way, versus just getting the instruction. And for some people, it works in the opposite direction. The instruction works better for them, better than people telling them that they want them to paint like a particular artist. But so I can show you this water drop now, and you can see I've got the dark blue, the white in the near to the center, and also the darker blue, so nearer to the very edges, which is trying to give it a little bit of that water bowl type feel. And then the bulge in the original glass for the photo had, in fact, let me take a picture of the photo I have on my computer, because that way I can show you what I mean, because I don't think it would be very fast for me to email myself that, but I do think it would be pretty fast if I just took this photo and showed it to you. So hold on. Let me go back to my photos, and okay, so here is the watercolor, I mean here's the glass piece that I've been basing this watercolor off of. And again, there's a glare on the screen, I can see it. Let me try to moderate it a bit. I don't know how to do that, but one thing you can see even with the glare, because I'm trying to look at the screen and I can see just the glare. I don't know if you guys can see anything, but you can see this glass lighthouse that I have here, and it's a photo of this glass lighthouse, and here's all the bubbles in the glass. And let me zoom into a bubble so you can see this is the bubble that I painted earlier down here, and the bubble that I'm painting now is this bubble right here. And there is a glare, but you can see what I was going for. I was trying to go for that kind of bubble. And it doesn't have to be exactly the same. And when you zoom in like this, I can actually see that I didn't have a white there and a white here like I would have had in this photo. So actually, I'll take this opportunity. You don't always have to copy the photo, but I actually like reflections, especially when it comes to glass. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and lift just a teeny bit right here. Just scratch, 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 just like that, like you are washing your paper. And you can buy, I have scrubber brushes that are tougher, but I rarely get them out because you don't always have to be that tough. They're really tough. They're like nylon bristle brushes, like a hard plastic, not like a soft synthetic hair nylon. And so you don't always want to do that. So I've done that right here. I'm scrubbing. And the last thing I'm going to do actually is, you see these little areas right here? Those weren't the white of they aren't painted white. They are actually lifted white, but not with the brush, with the blade. So let me be right back with the blade. It's in my drawer. I'm going to turn to my right here and get it. Oops, that was a hard noise. Sorry about that. So that's because I'm not used to having my camera set up over here, so I've kind of blocked myself in, but couldn't find I didn't want to leave you guys here for too long, but I couldn't find my X-Acto. I think it's in my tabouret area, but I do have this blade that you can get from Amazon. It's very cheap. You can use it for quick things. I wouldn't recommend doing any serious paper cutting with this because it's just going to hurt your hand and something else might happen, like the blade might flick out or something. But I'm going to see if this is dry. This is mostly dry. And I'm really warm, I'm really cold, so I'm wearing these hand warmers, but I think I'm going to take this off just for a second so I can have better control. And you can see I've flicked parts of that out using a blade, so I'm going to do the same thing here. See a highlight at the top, in the middle, and down at the bottom here. So I'm going to go ahead and flick those 3 areas with this X-Acto knife. And it's like a quick sweeping tap. Don't drag at the paper. Just quickly poke it, and it'll give you a nice abstract edge. It won't give you a finished edge. And you can go ahead and, because this paper is so thick, it gives you a nice feathered edge automatically, and it doesn't eat through the paper. Now the last thing you want to do is go back over this with more paint, because now that you've gotten rid of the top of the paper, which is where all the sizing was, it does actually have internal sizing, but you got rid of the external sizing. This is not going to take more paint well, so you don't want to put more paint down. on this. So do this last. If you're doing any kind of X-Acto highlights, do them last. I do want this part to be whiter. So you can see how brilliant white that is. It would be less white if I just used gouache paint, and it would also be less white if I lifted, because there would be some staining. But look at how white it gets when you do that. I do think this needs to be bigger because I can see in the, relatively speaking, that some of these highlights are bigger. And so I am being a little bit more cautious because I'm talking to you guys. Don't want to screw something up while I'm talking to you guys. The first time I'm doing this, you're like, I'm never coming back here again. But so I'm also getting a little bit off the top. And you can see just how much that makes that pop. Remember what I said about contrast earlier? Which is that if you have value contrast, things look real. So this water droplet looked good and then a little bit better when I did the darker blue, and maybe a teeny bit better after that when I did the ultramarine blue to make it even darker. But once I add that last pop of value, which is the white, super white highlight areas, especially in the darkest dark areas, suddenly this pops. Like much more than it would have if I had not put any highlights in or lifted them out just with the brush. Because there's only a limited amount of brush lifting that you can do. So I just wanted to show you that really quick, and that's the whole reason why I switched from one painting to the other. Really the only thing left to do on this painting is several more of these drops. So I am sorry I finished most of it before I got here, but I did want to show you how you can lift that with the X-Acto knives. But if you want me to do another drop, I can certainly come do another one, especially if more people show up and they can learn that tip before they go. I'm going to come back around and bring my other painting back so we can get going on that. And I think I'll start on the vase is what we'll do, is because I think if we start on the vase, then we can maybe learn some different blending techniques instead of just the wet on dry. And I did want to make sure I did a varied amount of techniques even in this first demo, because I do think that you guys would appreciate seeing that, you know, it's a little bit less boring than just the same old technique. So I'm trying to go to my photos and open my reference back up. Here it is. This really is a lovely mosaic. In real life, it's about like, I think 6 feet, you know, long, and I think a few feet wide. It was a very big mosaic. It was a walled painting at the De Young Museum, so it's really teeny what we're doing here to it. So let me close this lighthouse. Let me open, see if there's any more comments that are nice to respond to. Yeah, acrylic brushes are really nice for lifting. And yeah, you can always fix something with white. It doesn't become a strictly traditional pure watercolor painting if you do that, but there's nothing wrong with adding white if you need it to fix it. So I'm glad you guys are enjoying what I'm doing, and I really think it would be great if you posted your own questions. I can always answer them. It doesn't have to be about this painting. So, you know, you can, if you have any particular questions, then you guys can always do that too. So I'm gonna move this back across this way, and I'm down to 18% for my battery. So I have to make the decision whether or not I want to go back over to that side of the world and plug it in, or if I want to drag my switch over. I think I'll drag my switch over because I think I would like to complete a painting and move faster so that you guys can get your time, money worth for this first painting. So let me go get the plug real quick. It won't take me that long, and I'll put, I guess it's not really interesting to see that if you don't know what I did, so I'll just move this over here. But I'll be back in just a second. Just gotta put the plug in. And you might never know, I might be tap dancing. Alright, I don't know how together and professional other people's live streams are when it comes to having all their stuff ready, and I really hope I can make sure that all that is better in the future. So I didn't expect it to use up this much battery, honestly. A lot of battery power. Okay, so basically where my desk is right now, the switch barely reaches. As soon as I tap the desk, the switch flies right off. Hence the only 18% battery power left because it wasn't plugged in. So what I've done now is I've actually plugged it in, and it's a little bit further away from where I'd like to be sitting, but I might just scoot the desk if I retain a handful of people here and they want to see me finish this. So let's see. I'm gonna get back to this now. Okay. So I have this vase here, and there's a modeled pattern on this vase here in the photograph. It's got a really lovely marbleized speckled effect, and that's because it's really marble. It's not the effect, it's not faux marble. They really did put some kind of speckled granite or marble in there. In order for us to get that effect, we could do it in a few different ways. We could put white over the top of the green later, which we might do because this is already an opaque painting, and we can definitely start out by making this a wet into wet color mixing. So let's do that because we didn't really do wet into wet anywhere else. So I'm taking my brush just with water. I'm coming across the seam here. So I am going to end up having a little bit of a weird blend at that seam, but that's okay. This is a watercolor journal, and that's what watercolor journaling is good for, is that you end up having some cool, wet on wet, sorry. So we're doing wet onto wet here, and I've added more water. This is just clear water. Maybe you can see the sheen on the paper, maybe you can't, but I'm just adding a big old puddle of water all across my paper here. And all puddled up, and I think I'll also add it to this top part right here. I've had people tell me before on YouTube, like when they see my posted videos, that they think it's really brave of me to have like my computer like right here underneath my painting, and I'm like, it's not really brave, more than, I guess it is kind of reckless, but it's not really brave. But it's also just more of a, just the way that I work is a necessity. Sometimes I want to make sure, because I'm a control freak, that I don't move this off the camera. So I've got my computer right there and I can see what's going on, and I don't want to move it. So that's the only reason it's there, is because I want to see what's on the computer as well as what I'm doing. So I don't even want to move it over to the side, even though it's not even my reference area for it. Okay, so here I've got wet. I added more wet because it was drying off as I was speaking to you, because it's dry here. And even though it's raining outside, it's dry inside because we run the heater all the time to keep it warm. So I'm gonna get this green. Got a green in the corner here that is a darker red green. It's not a yellow green, and it's not a primary green. It's more like a sort of forest green is what it is. And so, yeah, well, it's nice to know I'm not the only person painting on my computer. And this color is running, but I don't really like the richness of it as much, so I'm gonna try to. So this is where you would get this little dapping dish of water and get a little spoon of water. I'm just gonna dump it right on the green. Okay, so apparently the water at my house is like really, it had like the most incredible water tension, so that it was holding on to that spoon like for dear life. I finally got it there. Should talk about that at some point too. And do some physics equations. So you can see here it's not spreading. See what's happening here? It's not spreading. It means there isn't enough water there. So I'm gonna have to go over there and add some more water. So remember what I said, if something doesn't do what you want it to do, then do the opposite with your water. So over here, I want it to spread, it's not spreading, which means I probably need more water. So I'm gonna add more water all over the whole thing, and I'm gonna just add it to the edges of this, and it'll sort of hopefully eat it up. About a hard edge. And I'm gonna do the same thing on this side now that I've added the water. And Looks like it's still a little bit dry here on this side. I guess it's the bulge in the journal here is making it so the water is pooling down in this little reservoir area. And it's keeping the blending from happening up here. So maybe I should get this area as quickly as possible after I put the water down, because it is going to run down here, I think. Yeah, there's like a big puddle of water down there, like a gully. You can see it sitting in there. I'm going to have to lift some of that water out unless I want that line, which I don't. So I did that, and I'm going to do the same thing down here and up here, so let's go ahead and do that. And you can see how using this transparently, these watercolor crayons, and again, these are Cretacolor watercolor crayons, and these are aqua sticks. So Cretacolor aqua sticks and Neocolor 2 Caran d'Ache watercolor crayons. Both of those are a mouthful, but if you go and look up Cretacolor, you'll find the watercolor crayons, and if you look up Neocolor or Caran d'Ache, you'll find their watercolor crayons. And so I've found that if you wanted me to compare products, that the watercolor crayons by Cretacolor are creamier, and they sort of melt quicker. Not the Neocolors are fine. I mean, if I'm obviously using them, but they're not as quick to melt as and don't give as, they're like a little bit more crayon-like and waxy instead of being more sort of creamy and gouache. So if you want something that melts a little bit easier, I would prefer the aqua sticks over the Neocolors. But they're both archival, and they're both light fast. And again, I've got, because of the journal, sort of water puddle here. I'm going to seep it out with a thirsty brush. So just dab the water off in the brush and pick it right out. Come back in with some more green and throw that in. And you can see that you can do the watercolor effect just fine. And using this transparently, if I had done this transparently all over, this would look more like a watercolor piece than a gouache piece. So I think that's really what's great about using these sort of like as a workhorse type product, is that you can really make them work like watercolors, and you can also make them work like gouache. You know, that little spoon came with a calligraphy set that I bought, I think, all the way back, and I didn't even buy it. One of my friends got it for me when I was in college. And so I've had it since I was 19. And she gave me that spoon because it came with a little Chinese calligraphy set, because I'd like to do calligraphy too. And what I didn't really know what to use it for, because I never really used it for thinning up calligraphy ink. I ended up mostly dipping into calligraphy ink. But I kept that spoon, and it went through different uses. I used to use it for, believe it or not, measuring herbal powders type stuff, and then now it's been brought back into the art world and is being used for dropping water in. The reason I like it better than a water dropper, which I also have, is I like the water dropper as far as the drips go. They're better, they're more precise, they're easier to use, but you can break the glass dropper when you're traveling, whereas with that spoon you can't. So this part right here, I'm not sure if I want to make it gold or if I want to make it green. So for right now, I'm lifting it, because as you can see in the photograph, that part is a gold. And you can see how quickly that lifted out. To see how amazing that lift was, even though this is not the best paper in the world. And it's because, again, these crayons are pretty good at lifting. So I got that. And now I'm kind of waiting for this to dry, because if I went and did another wet into wet, it may work and it may not work, because sometimes if you are just at the wrong sort of border of too dry and almost like a teeny bit of wet and a little bit of dry, it goes blotchy instead of spreading. So the other color I can see here is like a peach, but if I want to do the peach, I definitely want to wait till it's totally dry, because that's going to turn brown and muddy with this green. So this green needs to be totally dry before I do another abstract sort of effect into it. Because if I did a color like blue, it would be fine, because green and blue are close to each other on the color wheel. But if I did a peach or a red and green are complements, they're on opposite sides of the color wheel. They make a black if they're perfect complements, otherwise they make browns, and I don't want a brown vase, so I'm going to wait till it's dry. If you did want a brown vase, so that would be the way to go. So I'm going to wait for that to dry, and while that's drying, as always, move to another part of your painting, because yeah, you can, it does look kind of like Ebru, but for inks, no, when that calligraphy set was not for Ebru, it was for, if that's what you're referring to, it was It was just a traditional calligraphy set, but I do, when I've done Ebru, I haven't done it with inks as much as I've done it with like powdered pastels. I have a YouTube video on that as well. I'm trying to see if I want to also throw in just a little bit of green right here before I move on. I'm just going to do that wet on dry instead of wet into wet, and I'm going to blend the sides out. And you can see it gives a okay marbleizing effect, which is not as good as the other one, but it's because it's such a tiny space, I didn't really want to add a water to it. This base right here looks like I also need to marbleize that, so I'm going to marbleize that real quick as well before I move on. And in the meantime, my green up there is drying out and on its way to being ready for me to do the next thing I want to do with it. So watercolor does dry pretty fast, I have to say, unless you have drenched it, like it's the wet into wet with more wet into wet, and you're doing a giant piece of paper and you wet it front to back, which by the way does happen. It's especially for landscapes, it's a good idea to get something that sopping wet, but I didn't do it. I don't do it for smaller pieces like this, and so another perk of working with pieces that aren't gigantic is that you don't have to wait forever to dry. So maybe it's a combination of different things that'll draw you to a different size paper, right? You know, smaller paper dries faster. You can feel less intimidated by not as much white canvas space, and also there's other things you can do with it, which is that it's more decorative, I think, because if you have a smaller space, you're more likely to finish what you're doing with it quicker and then want to do more to it and more to it. So I almost feel like I have more embellished smaller pieces than I would if I had a much larger piece. They might go more abstract. So I'm going to test this. No, it's still wet. I can feel it. It's very cold. So if it doesn't feel room temperature against my hand, then it's wet, especially against my cold hands. Because my hands feel like they're like ice cubes. I've got terrible circulation. So one of these days I'm going to end up with like the most arthritic hands in the world because my hands are constantly just really cold and need these gloves to warm them up. But so what I'm going to do here is this part right here, as you can see, is a beautiful sort of terracotta burnt sienna type color. I don't have that color here, but we can mix it. So maybe we can put two colors down and it doesn't exactly turn into that color, but is close to that color. So what I'm going to do is, I see a brown here, and I need to make this brown a little bit more red. This is what I'm showing. I'm moving it over a bit so you can see. And you put the red into this brown. I'm trying to figure out if I want to put it on this side or this side. I think I'll put it on this side because I've got a little bit more space. This is a kind of decision you need to make for a small palette. Is, am I going to make my palette muddy if I mix the color someplace? So probably this is much better to mix up here, but since I haven't needed to, I've been mixing on the paper for most of these, but if I need to mix a bigger puddle, you definitely need to go over there because it keeps it from getting into your colors and making them muddy. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to put down different streaks of colors. So let's see what I like. Oh, this is still very brown, way too brown for what I wanted. So I'm going to put that brown down, and then so it doesn't offend later mixes. You have to be careful with colors, they offend each other. And so you put blend out the side here, and it's still very brown even getting lighter, so I can just come back in with the red here, very easily fixed, and throw in the red right next to it. And I think now that that's not warm enough, so it really is, it's went from being too brown to being too cold. So I think I'm going to throw a little bit of how to make something cold warmer. Add yellow, add orange. Those are the nice warm colors because we already added red. So I'm going to add a yellow red into it. And I'm going to try to actually mix it more. And I can finally see underneath the burnt sienna type color coming out. It is a little bit not perfect, but I might be the best I can do with the browns and colors that I have here. I can always go and tweak it some more, but I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to probably take the redder red, so I can do that too, because I think I started with the colder red and started on this side. It's totally much more what I wanted. So just gonna swallow all of that right up. And it's just that easy. But if as long as you're going darker on your mistake, it's totally okay, and you can still lift even if it's lighter. If it's a gouache piece, this is kind of a hybrid gouache piece because I'm using these watercolor crayons like gouache, which is to say more opaque, and then it's really easy to fix because you could totally fix stuff by just covering it up with more opaque colors. But even transparent watercolor is a lot more forgiving than people would have you believe. You really can lift out and correct a lot more than you would think. And you can see what's happening with these watercolor crayons is, again, they go down very smoothly. There's no streakiness to them, and they lift out very readily. And again, I wouldn't want to use these for a grisaille painting, which is an undervalue tonal painting, and then do more stuff on top of it. They would lift right up. If you watch my YouTube channel, one of my more popular videos is about grisaille and tonal painting and doing an undervalue painting as a sort of wash underneath your overpainting, and you'll end up having more realistic values that way and also have more correct tones that way. But if you if you don't know what I'm talking about, go and check that out. Go search for grisaille on my YouTube channel. But if you do know what I'm talking about, then you know that if you want to layer over it, Alex Ross, the comic book painter, he does a lot of grisaille type painting. So I keep interrupting myself and not finishing my train of thought sometimes when I'm painting. So if you didn't feel me finish doing what I'm talking about, then make sure you tell me. No, I think this brush is small for me. Is the smaller brush is fine for me because I can see that I could use the bigger brush. Like this one right here that could go right across. But since I've kept one for blending, I'm trying to be texturized. I'm trying to add some texture in this instead of giving it a straight flat wash area. So as a result of that, it's totally okay for me to go with a smaller brush because a smaller brush will lay down less flat and give me more texture. I think I just got a piece of lint from my glove into that base. It's more texture. If it's a hair, then make sure you lift it out. You don't want it in your skin. But if it's like transparent lint, nylon lint, it's not such a big deal. But so you can see what I'm doing here is I'm doing these sort of scrawly calligraphic marks that are making it so it's not just an even laying down wash. And it's not really a huge difference. If I painted it completely flat, it wouldn't be such a big deal. But it does make something of a difference to how I am looking at it close up. And if I scan it at a high resolution, I want to print it bigger. So that's the other thing you want to make sure you do when you have small pieces, by the way, is make sure you scan them at a really high resolution. Because that way if somebody likes your piece but they want a big version of it, a big painting to make them happy for their big blank wall, then you can print it out as a grisaille, as a giclée print for them. An art print or a poster, depending on their budget, their needs, whatever they want, and then they can get a big piece. But it doesn't happen if you just scan it at 300 or 350. You're gonna have to scan a piece like this, which is small, only like 4 by 12. You want to scan this at something like 600, 650 on your scanner at least, maybe even more depending on what your final size is. And that way, if you want to make a larger sized print, then you can totally do that. But that way you can have your cake and sort of eat it too, because if you want a large version of your own painting, or if somebody else wants a large version of your painting, then you can have that completely be possible. The version here is still more burnt sienna than the version here, which has gone more red, because I added more of that brown in it that actually has more of a red tone. But I'm okay with that for right now. I think if I totally feel like I really want it to be exactly that color, then I absolutely will come back and lift it and fix it. Because it is fixable. It's not a permanent problem. This is not ink. That's the nice thing about working with any kind of water media that is liftable, is if you work with watercolor or gouache, you can fix it. If you work with ink or acrylic, which are also water media, but they're permanent, can't fix it. So you can fix it by covering it, by going over it, but you can't fix it by lifting. That's what I mean, because ink is permanent. So ink is a permanent medium, and on the other hand, that also means that ink and acrylic are lovely for glazes that you can do that are transparent, that won't lift. If you want to do glazes like that with watercolor or gouache, first of all with gouache it's not going to be that easy, but you can do a few layers if you have a light hand. But if you do that with watercolor, use staining colors. Use very staining colors. So basically use the colors that are most like ink. And then when you layer, they will end up acting like ink. They won't lift as much. So for example, if you use sepia and you use indigo, and you use any of the phthalo colors, phthalo blue, phthalo green, or if you use alizarin crimson, all of those are very transparent staining colors, which means that they will be lovely for jewel tone washes, and they'll also go down and not come up. If you use your opaque colors, or if you use gouache, which is basically just opaque watercolor, so you might have some gouache colors hiding in your watercolor set already, which is what I found for a lot of these things, is all you have to do is find your opaque colors and use them as gouache. Use your transparent colors as watercolor, and then you don't have to buy 2 sets. Saves you some money and also lets you know what you like before you commit to a giant set of separate gouache. But use your opaque colors, cadmium. All the cadmium colors are really opaque colors. They will lift. Also, anything that is an earth color, like sienna. Well, raw sienna tends to be more transparent, but burnt sienna and ochres, yellow ochre, and they're all very, very opaque, and they act like gouache, so they're harder to layer. So basically anything that acts like an ink and is transparent, you can layer it. Anything that is opaque, it works more like a gouache and body color. So that's something that's comes with experience, but once you know that, it's very valuable information. And let's see, I've got just a single layer here. I can see a little bit of patchiness down here, which I liked, and I do see that lint drying in it, so I'm going to lift it up right now, and it's gone. And I also see a little bit of bleeding that came down here. So if you want to fix a spill, by the way, don't come back with a completely dry brush or a completely wet brush. Come back with a damp brush. So take a damp brush and then fix the bleed by lifting along that line. Angled brushes, that's one of the reasons why I have them. I do a lot of my painting with the round brushes, but I have the angle brush around for blending edges and also for lifting a straight line that can clean stuff right up. So see, you can do that. Over here, this is all, that's all dry. So it's all dry. I'm thinking about going back up there. I think before I do, I am going to take my brush here and I'm going to do the little thread work. So up here we did a lot of bleeding, and I'm going to go back and do more bleeding, at least 2 more layers. But until then, what I want to do is I want to take this area and decide, do I want to do this wet into wet, or do I want to do this effect wet and dry? I think to show you the different kinds of effects that you can do marbleizing with wet into wet, and you can also do marbleizing wet on dry. So let's try the wet on dry this time, because I do think the streaky marble here is different than the granite texture up here. So the granite and the green was very sort of, it favored, this speckly granite works well with how the blooms spread out wet into wet. I think these marbleized threads will work better because it's white with brown threads through it and marbleized sort of veins. Those veins will work better, I think, wet on dry. So let's get some of this brown. I'm trying to see if I want brown or if I want red. I think I like the brown. And if I don't, I can switch, right? So it's not like I don't have other colors there. You can always fix stuff. Always change your mind. So start on this side. If you're right-handed, start on the left side so you don't go over your work. If you're left-handed like me, try to start on the right side and go left, okay? Because it's not necessary, but especially because I'm working on camera and I can't rotate my page to accommodate what's wet and what's dry. I want to make sure that I'm not just going over my handwriting. It used to happen to me all the time when I was a kid, like you were doing cursive or something like that, you turn around and because you write from left to right, you're just making a big old smear on the bottom of your hand with your writing. So when you're painting, at least you don't have to do that. But you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just drawing like I'm drawing with a pencil, these marbleized lines right in. And I'm going to take a damp brush, and what I'm going to do, so these don't look like they've just been drawn on, is I'm going to just patch at them. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing, but I'm just patting them, and it makes parts of the lines disappear, and it sort of gives a little bit of a shadow area. You'll see it more as I get along further. And let me just make sure I have just make sure don't have any other comments that I'm missing. And I think we're doing okay. And put my brush back. Okay, so here I'm going to continue this veining. Wet on dry. Bring in the veins. And just try to think not too much about drawing a particular shape or even copying it exactly, but just vein in a spidery fashion, spidery lines. And pay attention to leaving some white space. Pay attention to the negative space and what it looks like, not just the positive space. And then go back with a damp brush and just poke at it. And what it'll do is it'll lift some of the color and some of the lines, and it won't look like just one hard line, and it'll give you a marbleized look. People might even think that you did this wet into wet if you do it like that, which is a very controlled way of giving a wet into wet effect. And if anything lifts out too much, go back and make it a little bit darker before you move on. And what's interesting is if you are painting while you're talking and also while you're on camera, you're most likely not going to get, I mean, you could get some masterpieces, but you know, if you paint in private and you pay more attention, you're gonna get more time. So hopefully, if you're doing this on your own someplace and you don't have to worry about doing this while talking, then you can pay more attention to the lines too. So I always feel like what I can do too is, when I turn off the cameras, I can come back after a day or so and just look at my work again and see, is there anything that I want to fix? Is there anything that I don't like? And I think over here towards this area, I don't really like how that's just one line going across. So I'm just going to again take my damp brush, make sure it's damp, not sopping, dry it off on my little cloth here, and then just pick up some of that. And it's less of a lifting motion than it is just a mopping dab. So that way, and I'm going to actually wait till it's completely dry, because you see what happens as soon as I put in a line next to it is it bleeds right out into that puddle. So I'm going to wait till that part's dry and come back. I just want to put like one thread going here and one thread going here, so I feel like there's some symmetry to, or some balance I should say, because symmetrical is not the only thing you're looking for, it's more about balance too. But I don't want to do that until it's dry. And that's coming across very nicely. I like that brown. I think if I'd gone with a redder color, especially when I was lifting some of them out, it might have gotten too light. It might have read too much like just pink into the paper. So I think this true brown is working better for that. You could also work with some metallic watercolor crayons or metallic watercolor pencils to add some mica type speckles. You know how you see that? I mean, mica, after all, comes from a mineral and comes from real rocks in the world. So if you want to go ahead and add some sparkly effects to your marbleized look, that's just going to add more verisimilitude. So go ahead and do that too. I'm going to be okay with this for right now, because I'm not going to get up and go fumbling through my tabouret in my closet right now, because that's just going to annoy you guys, because you'll just hear like a lot of noise and I'll be away. But I also feel like the rest of this piece has no metallic in it, so I feel like unless I find out a place where I really want to do the metallic, I don't want to throw in the metallic just here, because it'll seem out of place. Usually if you're going to use a color or an effect or anything in a piece, you should use it in at least 2 places, because then it looks like it fits in. If you use it in just one place, unless you're really going for like a shock effect of like the small amount of red and no other red in the rest of the painting for some very specific reason or something like that, you know, you don't want to do that. You don't want to have it in just one area. On the other hand, there's places and times where that is exactly what you want. You see it in cinematography as well. So I was reminded through another video recently of Schindler's List, and you know, Schindler's List used just red in a black and white area very sparingly, so you can really pay attention to what's going on screen. So you can always use just one color, just one place, and it definitely will get all the attention. It'll be a spotlight color. But typically for a meaningfulness that looks right, you don't want to use it in just one place. So, you know, there are exceptions like I just mentioned, but I typically want to use it in at least 2 places. And that's what I mean about that mica, is I don't really want to throw in that mica and have it nowhere else. So looks like when I drew this, I didn't exactly draw the right number of lines here. It looks like there's more gold lines here for this base. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually leave that part alone, because I do think I'm going to throw in some whatever it is. But I like this marbleized effect, and I think it's coming out fine. I like it. And I think if I want to go back and make any of those veins a little bit darker, I can do that. But I think for right now, I really like that. And let's go back up here and let's see what kind of magic we can do up there. Let's see, we've got green, and I said there was peach, but the other thing I want, I think, is maybe more green, because you can see how light that's dried back. Now, this is going to be a little bit dangerous because watercolor crayon dries lighter like watercolor, but remember what I was saying earlier is that it also bleeds more. So this brush, I'm going to test it. I'll test it with water down here and see how much this lifts. If it doesn't lift too much, then I'm definitely going to go in and put in more of my green. If I feel like it really takes my green and turns it into just a green without any definition, then I'm going to do wet and to dry granite effects up there rather than for the rest of the green. But I mean, I already feel like it's eating up some of my white green areas, the wider areas in the green is what I mean, because I feel like as soon as you add too much water to watercolor crayon and try to do layers with too much water, you know, like remember I was saying before, just like you can do layers but not too many and also not with that much water. Otherwise, that's not that it's 100% impossible, it's just it doesn't want to do it. So you're trying to make it do something it's not really quite happy with. So let's just see if I can get this dark enough this time that I don't have to do another layer. And that's not really spreading as much as I want it to. So instead of coming in with more water this time, because this is a second layer, I'm going to speckle with my brush. So I do feel like I'm going to lose some of that. So I can definitely speckle in these effects where it's not that wet, but in other places hopefully it'll just take the spreading and do that, because I'd rather the water did the work for me, you know. That's why you have watercolor, so that you let it do the work for you for bleeding effects, you know. For everything else you've got to do some of the work, but for the bleeding effects you can let it help you. Okay, so I like that, and I know that's going to dry back lighter again, but hopefully it won't be too light. And then after that I can go and wet on dry with some peach probably. And I think it was probably okay. Let me try to do a very light hand of water on here and see if it works. Yeah, it seems to be. I'm just barely skating on the top here. And you don't want to dig the front of the bristles in, just the side. And now, so it doesn't get mottled, or muddy I should say, I'm going to go in and just the same areas that I have. I guess I didn't add enough water. And I'm afraid to add too much water because I'm afraid that it's going to take my spots away. I think I will just model it with my brush a little bit of, because it really does look like the granite effect that I'm going for when you do that. Now I do seem to have like a patch here without it being connected, so I'm going to try to make it so that the image is more aesthetically pleasing. You don't want to just have like 2 empty patches out in the middle of nowhere. Okay, so I did that, and coming more across this way. I think I've connected this to the wall here, and the reason it's kind of strange looking is because the other side of the vase has much more. It has that bracket on it, this side does not. So it's because I didn't complete it, remember? So and more green up here. It's coming across very well. So I would say after that first wet on wet, the second layer would be a good idea if we did it like this, wet on dry. It's because it keeps the white areas more preserved. It doesn't blend into them as much, because I do think it does lift some of that green, and it turns it more into a light green glaze on the underlayer instead of preserving the blooms like I wanted. So you can already see that the white areas here and the green areas here, they're more distinct with each other than this area down here where it bled more. So I think that the next area I'm definitely going to just do it like that, like the wet on dry instead of a second wet on to wet. And I'm going to load up one brush with more of the green and get more of the water into the glass, from the glass here into my brush. So this is just ready and waiting. It's kind of like having a blending out marker, like a clear marker. So I have, if you are a marker artist, you know what I'm talking about. I don't use markers, but I do see people use them all the time on YouTube. They seem to be a giant thing. I like water too much to ever give up. I love the idea of the sort of wild and completely primitive water bottle with a brush and some hair stuck in it, a stick with some hair stuck in it, and a glass of water for me makes me excited, because I just feel like it's so free and spontaneous and just amazingly. Oops, just lost my brush for a second. It's because I guess my thumb stopped working. My brain sent a random signal to my head and just said, don't work anymore. Doesn't your body do that sometimes? You know, like when you're sitting around and for like no apparent reason at all, suddenly you just flinch or something, you know, it's like your brain misfiring. Well, that just happened with my thumb, and you guys saw it on camera. So, thumb stopped working. I wonder if I can file a report. You can see that granite look is coming across very well with this, and again, try to speckle your darker green in areas where you already had some green, even if it doesn't copy the pattern that you have in the photograph with the mosaic, because you want to have some areas that stand out more as white, which is what I was saying earlier, remember? It's just you want to have some areas that really look white and some areas that really look green, because it'll make it look attractive versus just a lot of green and no white. The white really is magical when it comes to watercolor paper. Keeping a real white, even if you're working in a gouache painting, there's absolutely no reason why you can't still preserve some white and work in a fashion where you try to keep a lot of the white of your paper. It just means that you can go ahead and throw in, you know, gouache white, you know, titanium white or zinc white as needed, but it's not obligatory. You don't have to put it in everywhere, and where you keep the white of the paper, it'll actually be more luminous. And so, not to say that you can't use the white again. You have to. You can. I might even show you guys using it in this face area. That's near the end, but I don't know that I'll necessarily have to, because I've kept a lot of this white so well that I think it's doing fine here. But you can see the difference with these two sections and this section down here, where it blended out a lot of the speckly shapes more, so it's more sort of, it doesn't look as disparate. So I mean, I like the separation better up here, because it speaks more to the speckles on the granite, whereas here I think it's gotten way too blended for me. So I am going to try to go back in and add more, just wet on dry, and then using my brush blender here, this high-tech tool that only just came out, I'm going to use a damp brush blender and just poke. Don't stroke, poke it. Just poke it. Speaking of pokes, I got my blood drawn over this last weekend, and oh my god, they can never find my veins ever. And they said I have small veins. That used to sound like a compliment when I was younger, and now it just means that I have to go through more pain than other people whose veins are more readily found. So I don't think it ever was a compliment. Thank you. It's just inconvenience. Basically, it means you're going to be the hard person to get blood from, and everybody here is going to hate you. And that's what happens when I go to those blood drawing stations. So I was at Kaiser, and they poked me, and I don't know if you can see my. Well, let's see. Get my stupid arm on screen just for a second. Can you see it? Can you see it? Nope, you can't see it. The camera's all the way over here. It's right there, but you can't see it. I tried seeing the camera, but the lights from the windows coming in from that side. But anyway, trust me, there is a gigantic bruise there and like more than 2 holes where they had to go and find the stupid blood. It was really irritating. I felt rather unhappy. I always get unhappy, but I always act really brave at the time. Like, this doesn't hurt like a lot. Go ahead, keep finding veins. I'm sorry for being such a hassle. And they can never do it the first time, which is really irritating. Sometimes they take like 3 times, and they wanted my left arm too. They're like, can we try the other arm? I'm like, no. They're like, why? I'm like, because I draw with that arm, and you can't have that one too. So. I am getting a lot of light coming in the window. I hope it's not over exposing my camera to the, let's see, let me try to move, and yeah, okay, that's better. Look, there's a light coming in that side of the window now, so it's starting to overexpose some of the camera. So if something washes out and you can't see it, just let me know, because I'm not necessarily 100% paying attention to what's going on the screen. You know, for my first stream, and I know that there's only a few people here, and this is the first time I've done it, but I have to say this is a lot of fun. I totally get why people do this now, because it's kind of like you're not really doing this by yourself. If you feel like talking and you feel like sharing with somebody, then you can do that. On the other hand, it's a lot slower with painting, so that's the trade-off, is that you're not going to be able to go as fast as if you just painted it on your own. But I think it's great to be able to share with people. I mean, I think that we as people, even introverts like me, because I really am very much an introvert. For as much as I like to talk, I actually love to be very private. That you just like to have some stimulus from outside people. You know, you like to know that something that you're doing is shared with other people, as it becomes a beautiful thing. When I get this crevice in the back of my journal here, it's sort of not really in my visual plane, so I've been missing it. I got it in, and it's right at the binding there, so. And you can see that speckling's coming across rather well. I like it. And you go ahead and dab that in. And so I think what we want to do next now is, first of all, let me quickly try to wrap up the part up here and the part down there. There are a lot of round chips. I don't know if you can see them. There's a lot of round chips of big stone whatever they put into this thing. So I think what I want to do, as well as, you know, I have saved the white of the paper, but I think if I want to go back in with anything to really show those white chips, it will have to use white paint too. You know, if I wanted to do that, there will have to be white paint. You can't not have, because otherwise it would have required me to save very round white spaces, and I wasn't going for that. I was paying attention to the speckly granite part of it and not the round rock chips part of it. So if you want to add that, and I may not, I may like the quiet of this, because it is louder when you have all those white chips. So my favorite brand of watercolor and of gouache is Schminke, and it's an expensive brand, but they have the same formula for their tube colors as they do for their pan colors, and I use pans. Some people have like a cheaper formula for the pans than they do for the tubes, and so you can buy the pans, like for example for Winsor & Newton, and it's not the same formula as for the tubes, and so you sort of feel like if you're using the pans that you kind of got gypped, you know, so I just feel like if you want to get the exact same quality and not feel like, even if it's, you know, somewhat imagined, because I don't know really what the differential is in quality, but I do know that the tube colors are supposed to be creamier and they're supposed to re-wet better and everything and to sort of be softer. So you don't want like these really hard to use pan colors, and so that's one of the reasons why I really totally go for. Oh, by the way, I should tell you, just as an interruption out of nowhere, apropos of nothing, if there's any kind of bug ever shows up while I'm doing my Twitch streaming, it doesn't matter if it's a moth or a spider, I will be completely freaked out, and then something will have to be done to take care of it. I'm not very good at doing the taking care of it either, so let's just hope no bugs show up. I'm just letting you know though that if a bug shows up, it's gonna be like complete and total, like absolutely crazy apocalypse now at my house, because I am scared of bugs, like really scared of bugs. So hopefully that won't happen while streaming, because I'm pretty sure you didn't come here to see me scream about bugs. You came here to watch me paint, but you know, it's not something I can guarantee. But going back to the tube versus pan colors, makes you sound so professional. I'm scared of bugs, so let's talk about tube and pan colors again, because I'm oh so professional. But I don't like really hard pans, because I don't want to get something where it's not gonna not be resoluble and reconstitute in a very fluid manner, because I don't want those colors. I want colors that re-wet really well, have really nice pigments, and make me feel like that I paid for something that is very sweet and soft and lovable, and not some plastic pan that reminds me of cheap, kindergarten watercolors. So that's why I like Schminke, because they have lovely pan paints, and I also like Sennelier for the same reasons. Their pans are very soft because they have the honey in them, and they've got really nice colors. I do have some watercolor sticks that I haven't tried yet that I got from Daniel Smith and Winsor & Newton, so I think I'm going to have to use those at some point just to see what they're like, because I thought maybe they're a good trade-off for the pans is to get sticks, because you can use them in different ways. So I like how all that green has come along. Can just get the base here and add in some more mottled speckled effects here. And again, you find what your water and paint did in the underlayer, and then you exaggerate it. You use that as a launching pad. So stop using the photo after a while, after the first layer, especially if it's a random effect, and then follow the random effect that you created just through the paint and the water drawing and that wet and wet, because that way you don't have to fight against the white and the green that are already there if you're following a random effect. I mean, after all, it's just a random granite effect, even in the photograph. So it's not like you're trying to get somebody's face or, some kind of likeness. So if you see green and it's landed someplace, then exaggerate it. And if you see white, then save it. And don't pay as much attention to what's going on in the painting, because then you're just going to be doing double work for yourself if you have to do it in the opposite direction with your values. So like that, I really think that's okay. I might come back and darken it up, but for right now I like it. And let's see what else I'm going to do. I want to come back down here. I'm going to let that dry off completely, because I know it's still a little bit wet. Come back down here, and I'm going to go and throw in the black here, and come back over it with white later to marbleize. I do see that this is the only place in the whole painting that has black. I'm not 100% sure now that I want to use the black. Let me see if there's any other color that would look good. After all, you've got red, orange, yellow, green, blue. You don't have any purple. We've got a little bit of lilac up here where I mixed that one tulip. So maybe I'll do a little bit of purple down here instead of black. I know that it's a black marble and such, but I don't really know that I want to do black in a painting where there's no other black. And I think that I'll rather make that blue or purple. So maybe I'll make it blue. And the reason I'm switching to blue is because you can see that I made these very blue, these tips around the flower. So a nice way to bookend, which is, I love using that term, is a nice way to bookend this color is to throw some blue all the way at the bottom of this painting, because this is like a long vertical painting now because I'm using both pages of the journal. So I'm going to throw in the blue here. And I think the blue I used was the bluer blue. I mean, by that I mean more primary blue and not this warm ultramarine blue. So I'm going to go back and switch to a warmer blue, or a more primary blue, I should say, because ultramarine is warm. It's warm because it's got red in it. There's different kinds of warm. So you can have a warm blue that has red in it, and it's an ultramarine blue. And then you can have a blue that has, the more towards green you go, blues typically get cooler. So that's why they say cool blue if it's towards green or teal. And if you have more of a warm blue, it's got red in it. But of course, I've seen some blues that seem to be warm anyway, even though they've got a lot of green in them versus having red in them. So sometimes it's just about relativity, right? So what you're doing for your painting at that time, does it, around the other colors, does it look warmer or cooler? And that's probably going to be enough to help you determine whether or not it's a warm or cool color, because all colors are relative. Some colors will look very cold in a painting, and another painting will look very warm. So I'll let that dry completely. In fact, I think I do want to make it a little bit darker because it's not quite, because of the waxiness, it's lifting a bit. That's that same waxiness I was telling you guys about. So I'm going to lay it down a little bit darker in some of these places, but you can see that it lifts up a bit. So that's really, if I had to say that the kryptonite for watercolor crayons is that they do lift more. So let me update myself on my comments, make sure my comments are doing okay. And I think they're doing fine. And by the way, for future streams, I'm probably going to be streaming on Fridays, because that way I can have somebody moderate questions and stuff for me, much more than I would be able to do on other days of the week. So I think that would work better. I think what I'm going to do, because I don't know how long I've been streaming, let me check. I don't want to make this like the most longest stream in the world either, so just because I think that after a while a piece can get boring. But let me see. I guess there's no way to tell. Does anybody can tell me how long I've been streaming? I don't know. I have no idea. Weird. Well, it's just because I don't know how to I don't know how to figure this out on Twitch. It just says live. So I don't know what that means. I don't know. I mean, I know I'm live, hopefully, but I just don't know how long it's going. But let's see. So I've got this nice, lovely. This is very relaxing, actually. I hope that people are feeling relaxed if they're watching this, because I feel relaxed. It doesn't feel stressful anymore. Started out feeling very jittery and having some shaking hands from adrenaline and stuff, because I've not done this before live, but it feels very relaxing at this point. So I think I'm going to go and throw in the peach there, which is a nice color for, so I want to try to see if I want to do peach with white or just peach on its own. I think I want to do a little bit of the peach with white, and the reason I'm saying that is because it'll end up getting muddy if it's got red in it, and peach does have some red in it. So if I put some white in it, it protects it a little bit. It has some protection from getting, it's a bit more opaque, and so as a result of that, it's going to okay, so I'm trying to make sure that I'm mixing this so that you guys can see it, because then that might be helpful to somebody. There's the white. And I don't think I want quite a red color. I do want more of a peachy peach. That looks just peachy. Okay. I like it. Alright, so now I'll go back in with this color. And it is on this brush versus the other brush because I used it for mixing. So I'll try dabbing it in with this brush first, and if it works then I'll just switch my blender brushes for this time around. So in this area, I see some peach right here in the photograph. And I can of course use the photograph again for the peach because there's no peach already on the paper, so I can put it wherever I want. And same thing for over here. It's funny how little people know about gouache. Gouache actually, again, this is not conventional or like strictly gouache. This is watercolor crayons being used as gouache, which is an opaque watercolor. But for our intents and purposes, because we're using a opaque watercolor, I'm going to say that we're going to be using this as gouache today. But people don't know about gouache, even though it's been around for a long time. So all those golden age illustrators typically worked transparently, but also threw in some gouache and some opaque effects. And so it's a nice thing to have when you want to have like cloudy, misty scenes, so even or highlights that you didn't save. Even if you're using everything else transparently, you can go ahead and use gouache for those effects, the white opaque gouache, and then most of your other colors are just transparent. Or you can paint your entire painting in gouache, which is all opaque watercolor, and it means that you have a great sort of velvety painting effect that looks like acrylic or oil when you're done rather than watercolor because it's all opaque. And I did some gouache videos on YouTube that really got popular. Actually, I think I should have tried harder to put out more videos at the time on gouache, but since I had family obligations, I wasn't able to. But and so I did see other people then put up gouache videos around the time that my videos were taking off, and I do think it's because people were asking these questions about gouache because of these videos going up that I had made. And it's interesting because gouache is such a versatile and easy medium to work with, but it's really gotten kind of extinct because acrylics came out in the 60s or somewhere around that time. And then after that, people like illustrators and graphic designers who were using gouache all stopped using gouache. They all went back to using acrylic. Or they started using acrylic, not went back to. They started using acrylic because it was a new, fresh medium. It was permanent, it didn't lift, so it did what gouache did, but better. And it was, so nobody used gouache as much after that. But now people, the reason my hands are no longer in the screen, by the way, is because I'm stretching my hands just for a second. But the reason people use a lot of acrylic now, of course, is it does a huge amount of work for you if you just use the acrylic because it doesn't lift up. But the great thing about gouache is that if you don't like the plasticky feel of acrylic, then you can go ahead and use this amazing medium. And yeah, if you're asking the question about if you mix gouache with watercolor to make it more opaque, I mentioned in one of my videos a while back that if you have watercolors and you want to use them like opaque colors, then all you have to do is just add 10 to 15% white into a watercolor color, which is any transparent color or even an ink, and it will make it opaque and you can use it like gouache. So you don't have to buy a new set of gouache in order to paint with gouache. You can use you look for the colors in your watercolor set that are more opaque, which means that they cover a black line if you draw it on a paper versus versus a black line showing completely through them. It also should say in the set itself, it should come with a paper that lists the pigment properties of your paints, or it should say it on the website. So if you go and look on the website, or if you go and look on the paper that comes with your watercolor kit, it'll tell you if your colors are staining, not staining, sedimentary, not sedimentary, opaque, semi-opaque, or transparent. So it'll tell you all this information, and you can use this information then to decide if you want to use the opaque colors like gouache, which is like by themselves, or if you want to make your transparent colors opaque by adding white to them, which is zinc white or titanium white, to make them opaque and use them like gouache. And that way you can have a set that you use like watercolor when you want to, and you can use it like gouache when you want to. But the great thing about gouache is that you can fix things and cover them up in a way that you can't do with watercolor, and also it looks like acrylic or oil when you're done versus looking like watercolor. So you can get all of the effects. You can basically have all of the effects you want. You can have watercolor effects with the transparent colors. You can have gouache effects, which look like acrylic or oil using the opaque color. So, you know, that's the cool and interesting thing about using the opaque colors is that you know you have this amazing capacity to make your work look like whatever you want it to look like for that day. Suppose you're doing a piece that's really washy, use your watercolors and your transparent colors. And if you want it to look like oil or acrylic and really sort of illustrative and like very realistic, because you can get more realistic effects with gouache, then use your opaque watercolors and use white in your transparent watercolors to make them opaque. If you don't have any opaque colors at all, just add some white to some of them. So it'll make them opaque, and then you can use them like gouache. And of course, watercolor botanical painting, like realism botanical painting, is very realistic. But it is a harder to achieve realism than if you used gouache to make it realistic, because the gouache already goes down thick and allows you to have thick layers, allows you to fix mistakes easily rather than constantly trying to save the white or lift back to the white. So it's just a nice batch of tools to have. So I think you might see that I am coming along on these peach granite effects that I am doing. And I do think that doesn't need to be a huge amount. The funny thing is I don't think that online on the screen there you can see just how pretty it looks in comparison to what it looks like in real life, which is unfortunately always a problem if you don't see stuff in the camera. Doesn't always capture the beauty of a detail in a painting. You have to get a zoom in. So maybe when I put this up later on Instagram, a portion of it, then maybe you'll be able to see it. So I'm going to continue putting in this part up here. I don't really know if there's anything even there that's peach. I just know that I want to echo some peach there in the and it's turned into more of a rusty ochre type color than a peach, and that's kind of what it looks like in the photograph too. So it looks like it's working. And I'm trying to see if there's anywhere else. I like the balance of it up there. I like it okay down here. I think I might add a touch more in the corner here. Works good, looks good, like that. And I think over on this side, I didn't really get anything in this, so I'm gonna dab some in over here. Again, you want to poke at the edges to make them all look speckly granite-like. Don't leave them all hard and stuff, because you want some of them hard, but you don't want all of them hard. So, okay, I think that's looking pretty good to me. I think I'm gonna go ahead and add the blue in, because I do see that there's some speckles of blue in there as well. So I think that would be nice, because then it would echo the blue at the top and also the blue at the bottom that we're gonna marbleize later. And then after I'm done with the blue part of it, I think I'll do one bud someplace, one of those tulips or such, and after that I'll take a break from the streaming and maybe finish the stream some other time, or come back and show you the finished piece next time and start a new piece, because I think you guys would like to see a new piece too. But anyway, so I'm going to go and get this blue, grab this blue. And it looks rather blue. It looks, the speckles I see here, very sort of ultramarine-ish, actually. I don't have very much ultramarine in this piece, so I think I'm going to stick with more of the primary blue. And I'm just going to throw it into a few places here. So there's a little bit over here. And just speckling it in, wet on dry, and then as before, go ahead and yeah, gouache really was very common in posters. In fact, all of the poster art and magazine art and everything else that you guys see, that's World War II posters and magazine stuff, magazine covers, magazine interiors, movie posters, everything was all gouache until it got replaced with acrylic. And one of the reasons they do that is, you know how you're reprinting with all these posters? I mean, very rarely are you hanging up an original, right? Well, those reprints reprint really well if you're using an opaque medium like gouache, because watercolor, as you might know if you're a watercolor artist, is really kind of tricky to scan and also to print. Sometimes some areas don't look dark enough, or they don't never look as pretty as the original, is what I've found, and you always have to try to tweak it and stuff. So the easiest way to reprint something very close to the original, of course, if you're a watercolor, you're not going to stop using watercolor if you're a watercolor fanatic like people like me, but you are going to sometimes say, well, let's try gouache for a situation where I want it to make sure that it scans and prints completely well. So for children's picture books and posters and all these other things in the past, people used to use gouache all the time. Old Disney movies were also done in gouache, like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White. All of them are opaque gouache, and how they did them was that the backgrounds used some transparent watercolor effects, but also a lot of gouache for the big background sheet. And then when they painted on the film, on the actual plastic film, they were always painting on gouache on the wrong side of the film. So they'd flip over the drawing and paint on the back, and that way it comes down really flat in those cartoon cells. And that's how they created all those movies, is that it was all gouache too. So gouache is a very heavily used medium for a long time, and then it just got replaced with acrylic, because acrylic was like I said, it doesn't lift, and so it's easier to use. But definitely, I don't like acrylic. I've never used it. I've used it to paint furniture and stuff, and I did a mural once when I was younger, in high school in acrylic, and I've also done a few big pieces in canvas some years ago, like 7 years ago, with acrylic. But I never took to it because it had such a sort of tacky, plasticky feel, because that's what it is. Acrylic is a plastic polymer. And so gouache, on the other hand, feels very velvety. If you use your opaque colors, you might notice, like if you have ochre colors or cadmium colors, or if you use your white, you might notice it feels really velvety. It has like a really sort of creamy, velvety way of going down on the paper. I love that versus the awful plastic feeling. I'm not trying to offend people who use acrylic. If you're using it, and I've seen some people do some amazing things with acrylic, it's just not for me. I just don't like the feel of it. So I think that for me, that's why I prefer gouache infinitely to acrylic, even if it lifts. And on top of that, you also get way less chemicals, because gouache has the same binder as a watercolor. It's got gum arabic, or it's got honey. It's not using a plastic polymer. It's not using acrylic binder. So as a result of that, if you don't like the smell of acrylic, or if you're going to grow sensitive to it after a while, I mean, I have allergies to a lot of things, and it's great to use gouache because it does not have that. But yes, it will lift. You have to be careful. But I think if you use a combination of inks, watercolor, and gouache, so your transparent colors, your staining colors, your inks, and then your gouache, then you can make sure for things that you don't want to lift, you use the staining colors. For things you want that are okay lifting, use gouache, or use less layers. And you can have a happy marriage between all of them. So you can end up making your ink, your watercolor, and your gouache paints work for everything. And you might not even need to buy separate ink or separate gouache. You might have a watercolor set that has staining colors in it that you use like inks, and it has opaque colors in it that you use like gouache, or you add white to your watercolor colors and make them behave like gouache. And then so you can have like this multi-use set as a watercolor set that can do all of these things. So it's important to have this information. It's not very well known. I think I put this information out there, and you don't realize how few people actually know some of the stuff that I'm saying right now, but you can really make that happen with your watercolor set, is you can use it like inks and gouache and watercolor. So okay, so what I'm going to do now is I've done the speckling in the blue. I really like that. I want to see if I can show it at a different angle, maybe, so you can see just how pretty it is. I don't know if it'll focus all the way up there because I do have the focus on manual down here. But I'm also now going to go in and add, you see that I had one cool flower and all the other flowers are warm. So I want to do something to make some of these flowers warmer, because I do think that that cool flower really stands out, and there's no other cool flowers. It seems like in here there's cool flowers. There's one down here, but it's also on that side. So I think one of the things I want to do is make this flower cool, and definitely that flower cool, and I'm trying to see what else I can do, because I feel like one of these flowers might need to be lifted out and made cool, because it can't just be these ones down here. I like him. I don't know if I want to destroy him, but I think he might need to be made more cool, because I see no other little bit of coolness going on there. maybe he'll be halfway cool. Maybe that's what I'll have to do, is make him halfway cool. And because he's not, or maybe I'll need to make this warmer. I mean, I have to do something because he doesn't really fit, is what I'm saying. It's like all by itself as the cool flower. So I think I will go ahead and lift this one. It's much better than lifting him, because I do like that. So I think he's the one who's gonna have to suffer. Let's see. I'm sorry, buddy, you're getting a makeover. So I'm gonna lift this, and you can see that. See that? Go right back to white, more or less. And I have my paper towel right here and just dab at it, and you can see that it's going right back to. There's still some staining. I'm not gonna say that it's not staining. And the other option would have been to have painted over it, right over it. Because this is waxy watercolor crayon, I try to lift as much as I can first and then paint over it, because that way I don't have to fight for being too delicate with the layer underneath it. You know, it's just a better idea than to constantly be at war with the underpainting part of it, whatever's down there. So now I'm going to go ahead and make this nice and cool. So over here it was just an orange flower, but I am going to make it into a nice, cool magenta fuchsia type color. And so let's go in and throw, no, it's a little bit too much color, a little bit too much vibrant all at once, and pick some of that up and put it there, pick some of that up and put it here, and I'm going to blend some of it out, so don't worry, it's not going to look as frighteningly dark as it is right now. And blend out the edge here. Funny thing is, I have large brushes, and oh, thanks, I'm glad you like it. There's a, I just don't get out my large brushes very much for some reason. I'm like, let's just use the whatever I have here. But, and I think it's also because I like to fiddle. I'm a fiddler, and in some ways I really have to learn not to fiddle, and on the other hand, I really like the small size stuff with small details, and you know, it doesn't stress me out. To me, it calms me down. It makes me zoom in and just be all about the small page and a master of a teeny little domain just for a second. You know, I don't have control over so many things in your life. You know, a lot of times, health, family members, all sorts of things, and got a painting that you can escape into, do something lovely, make something beautiful, make something that calms you down, something that makes you happy, and also is a great escapism. I found the older I've gotten, I used to read like just insane, like just read like I was like a reading honey badger when I was younger. Still read, but I found that I need something a little bit. It used to be better escapism for me. I feel like I can't get as escapist as I would like to. I mean, I feel like I'm still thinking about things that I'm stressed out about if I'm reading. But when I paint, I feel like because it uses a different part of my brain and it uses more of my brain, that I can use that as a very successful escapism. So I would totally recommend, even for people who don't paint, you know, to try painting and see if that helps calm you down. Because, you know, if you're a frazzled person or if you've got a lot on your mind, sometimes painting really helps. And I actually have chronic pain issues, and also have chronic hives, and also have autoimmune issues. So I've been sensitive and sick for a lot of my life, and I've also feel like it helps me not focus on things that are stressing me out, even with my own health when I paint. And one of the other things I can say about painting is, of course, because of my chronic pain, I can't paint all the time, so I have to limit how much I can paint because it starts to hurt. But it's not because of the painting. The pain was all there before. It's just I have a limited amount of hand use and a limited amount of other use because I've got very over flexible joints, and I end up having a lot of pain because I'm overly flexible. It's called hypermobility, and so I just have to budget my time and I don't do as much work as I'd like to, of course. Doesn't matter if it's painting or anything else, because I just don't have the budget for it. But you can see what I did here. I lifted the warm color, and I went back in with the fuchsia and the purple, and then I blended out half the petal edges with white, which is really just super opaque, right? White's like the opaquest color you can get, apart from like a super opaque black. And because it has so much, in fact, this zinc oxide or titanium oxide, whatever they make the white with, it's one of two things, either zinc oxide or titanium dioxide. And these are the same mineral opaque powders that they use in mineral sunscreen. So if you're wearing sunscreen, I tend not to because I'm sensitive to stuff, so I just try to limit the amount of stuff I put on my face. But if you use a mineral sunscreen, this white color that you're painting with is the exact same color you're putting on your face. And so that's why it's opaque. It does the same thing. It deflects a lot of the light particles and throws them off. And instead of the light wave particles soaking into your skin. So that's why it's so opaque. It does the exact same thing on the paper. It gives this shield that unlike transparent colors where you can see right through them to the paper and the light comes back through the paper through the transparent color and hits you in your eye. But with the opaque colors, you've created a shield just like you do when you're faced with the sunscreen. So that's exactly what that is. It's the same mineral. So you want to use it when you have it sunscreen, it's 20%, right, in your moisturizer. If you want to make it opaque in your paint on the paper, it's 10 to 15%. So as soon as you put that into a color, it'll turn into an opaque color, whether it started out as a transparent color or not. As soon as it's more than 15% white, it's an opaque color. So I've got those two that are opaque, even more than some of, like you can see here. I guess I should make sure I don't put so much water in there that it loses it. But if you have the granite effect down here, this is all white of the paper. So you can see the different white maybe in life. I don't know if you can see it on camera. This is an opaque, matte, velvety look to it, and this has a very sort of luminous white paper quality to it. And that's because that's the difference. This is white paint and that's white paper. So you'll see the difference when you do that. I think the last thing I'll do before I head out is I will go ahead and add the veining into that blue that we substituted for the black here, and I will use the white for it. So I'm going to go in here and get my white, and if you have more than a few brushes around, maybe you want to mark the ones that you use more often so that you don't keep getting out new brushes and old brushes at the same time. So one of the things I do is I put tape at the back of this brush because that way I know it's the one that I got out. That way I wear out my brushes in a very planned way, so that way I know if I want to use a dull brush, which ones are the dull brushes, which are the unused brushes, which ones are the used brushes. So it just gives you a little bit of help, and you may not need it. You may be, may have separate drawers for your brushes, or may not have that many brushes, or know all of your brushes like your toes. So I don't know, maybe you don't, but that's how I do it. So what I'm doing is I'm doing the same veining that I did with the part down here with the brown, and I'm going to continue to do fat and thin random strokes to make it into a marbleized type look. And I was blending out some of the other brown strokes when I did this marbleized veining. In this case, I think I will only very lightly do it because white is weird that way. It doesn't blend and lift off of another color as the pigment colors do. It sort of has a waxy, even by itself, it's more of a resist. I think you might have seen in my 77 effects watercolor video that I show how you can use just white gouache by itself as a resist. Well, that's why, is because it actually resists coming up once it's down on top of another color. It's not that you can't blend it, but it has like a little bit of a skin to it, so you can actually lift other colors up around it. Yeah, I agree. I think if you say that you paint and you draw and you feel it gives your life more meaning, I totally agree. That's exactly how I feel. I feel like it clarifies for me, kind of like a crystal, like what I find beautiful about life, because I can sit down and paint what I find beautiful or what makes me feel inspired or admiring of what I see around me. And as a result of that, I feel like it gives my life and what I can observe and what I've learned from that observation, it gives it more meaning. So, but you can see what I've done here. I'm going to try to zoom in here real quick and see if I can focus that on that, and so you can see what I've worked on so far in detail. And then I'll probably be heading out because I am starting to conk out with my hands and my neck with the pain. So it's all not really because of the painting. It's more like sitting in one position, right? Because that's what you do for any kind of live streaming or filming, is that you have to sit in one position. So let's see if I can zoom this in a bit more so you can see what I did. I hope we can zoom in more, and hopefully it'll autofocus too. Let me see, hold on. I'll make it a little bit bigger so I can see, and then can't really tell what I'm doing. Also, I'm pushing the plus and I don't see it going in anymore is what's going on. So okay, so here goes. It's going out if I do this. So it looks like I can only make it go up to that much. So after that, it looks like if I push it, it doesn't really do anything. Let me see if I move it up and then zoom in. No, it doesn't make any difference. Okay, so that's the most zoomed in I can get. So let's just look at this for a minute. So what we have here is I have the blue, so let me try to reiterate some of the art concepts that we applied here. So we had warm colors like this orange and the yellow, and we also had cool colors like this lavender fuchsia mix that I did. I only had it in one place. I made sure I added in another flower that had some cool parts to it, because I don't want it to have just one area on the whole painting that's cool. You need to have some kind of echoing in other parts of the painting usually. Otherwise, things typically tend to look odd. They don't always. Sometimes you can have it as a spotlight effect, but otherwise it can look pretty odd. The other thing I wanted to show is that if I have a blue up here, then I want to put blue someplace else. And so I put blue all the way down here in the original photograph. In the mosaic, this is a black plaque, but I turned it into a blue plaque so I can bookend this blue with the blue up here, and also so I don't have to use black in just one place and nowhere else. And so again, it's about color patterns, color happiness, and color harmony. You know, when you look at this stuff, that's what you mean by color harmony, is are your colors working well together? Do they look like they fit? And so the other thing I did when I was coloring this is I made sure when I was painting the leaves to make sure I didn't mix the yellow green or the blue greens on the paper. I just put in the blue or the green or the yellow on here, and I let them mix on the paper so that it makes better mixes that sort of stay more separate instead of turning into one flat dull color. And again, that'll give you more sort of beauty with how you look at your colors. The other thing we did is that we did some really nice granite texture here, and we did some marbleized texture down here. So with the marble veining, I just went in wet on dry and drew in these lines, and then I dabbed out certain parts of the lines to make them blotchy. I did that for the brown on the white and also for the white on this blue. But for up here, I first laid down a wet into wet green effect so that I had some green blooms on the white paper. After that dried, I came in wet on dry and added in more speckles for the blue and the green and this light sort of ochre peachy color. And what we did for that was it was again wet on dry, and then I poked it on the paper and then poked a damp brush around it to blend in some of the effects. And that's what we did today, and I hope you had fun. We talked about gouache, we talked about watercolor, we talked about the different mediums, we talked about some artists like Dulac and Beardsley and John Bauer, and hopefully we'll continue our conversation about artists and mediums and painting and techniques and watercolor in the future. And I'm really glad that you stopped by. Thank you so much for coming, and hope to see you guys again. And now I just have to stop this. So let's see where to stop it. I don't know. I guess somebody's gonna have to tell me where to stop it, because now I don't know how to stop it. I guess I go to. So I sort of kind of said goodbye, and then it's like, don't know how to stop it. Okay, here it is. All right, I think I'm stopping it now. So if it really stops after this, thanks for coming. Bye. I'll talk to you guys later.